Scenario 6 Rebellion. You must put down a peasant revolt led by Roland's forces. All are allied against you, but you have Lord Coldagon, an experienced hero, to help you. Capture all enemy castles to win. It's a peasant revolt, and we just got the favor of the Necromancer's Guild, so let's go with the Necromancer's Castle. You have received a message from Archibald. General, these peasants deserve punishment. Put them to the sword and let Coldagon have his way with them. Lord Coldagon is a knight with expert necromancy, so not the usual sort of knight. And here of course is Dallana, the necromancer, who will be assisting him in crushing the rebellion. In our castle of Saltpicol we have the first 3 tiers of creature dwellings: the excavation, the graveyard and the pyramid. The next logical step would be to build the mansion, for which we need the Thieves Guild. Of course on the first turn I am a lot more likely to build a statue to continuously for the rest of the game get more funds out of this castle. Of course upgrading the second or the third tier of creature dwellings is also an option, but it's a choice between getting stronger tier 2 or tier 3 creatures and getting higher tiered creatures altogether, so I think higher tiers are just a lot more of a priority to get. Here you can see the area around our castle, or to be more precise, around the watchtower. Of course Lord Coldagon is highly experienced, so getting a single chest is unlikely to level him up at this point. You know, sometimes I amaze myself. Here's the thought process. To get the vampires, I need the mansion. To get the mansion, I need the Thieves Guild. To get the Thieves Guild, I need 5 wood, and to get the mansion I need 10. And I initially have only 10, while needing 15. Of course I now have the wood necessary to erect these structures, but I don't have enough gold, which is a damn shame. Of course I can get just the Thieves Guild in anticipation of later on getting more gold, enough gold to finally build the 4th tier of the creature dwellings. I'm heading south, kinda exploring the territory, kinda getting all the chests and resources. Now I can finally get the vampire's mansion, the upgrading of which is going to be extremely costly. And upgrading buildings is quite important, because if you have unupgraded units, they are obviously different units than the upgraded versions, so you cannot have both in the same slot of your army. This is not much of an issue if you have enough slots to fill, but in most circumstances you will have quite a variety of creatures. So you want to have them together, and you can't just de-upgrade the upgraded version, so you need to upgrade the unupgraded versions, and guess what? It's expensive as hell to upgrade or to train the unupgraded versions of creatures into the upgraded counterparts. It's a lot less expensive to just buy them upgraded already. And as such, you are very much tempted to just hold off recruiting anything until you can get the upgraded version and save some money in the process. Unfortunately, you also do need the units to accomplish things on the map, even early on, especially early on. Early on every creature matters, and it matters a lot. I got the skull pile, because, you know, skulls for the skull throne. Because I want to have more skeletons. Lord Coldagon already has necromancy on expert, so every time he attacks something, especially a group of peasants, or anything that's numerous basically, I will get so many skeletons back. And I want to have even more skeletons from the castle, so that his army of skeletons will be nigh unbeatable. And that's a very good intuition. In most circumstances, you don't really want to fight with these skeletons. I mean, it's a tier 1 unit. It's fragile, they just die almost immediately to almost anything because they don't have a lot of hit points. But if there are so many of them, if they have the strength in numbers, they can deal quite a bit of damage. Dallana's goal in life will be to travel all around, deliver the reinforcements to Coldagon, because hey, someone has to, and she's the dedicated reinforcements girl. And she will also collect any sort of loot she can find, and she might even visit things like windmills if they are somewhere nearby where she's supposed to go. Now I am purposefully antagonizing these peasants, purposefully fighting against them here, because I want and need more skeletons for my army. I even was explicitly instructed to fight them by Archibald himself. So let's do as we were asked. Of course, they can't really do a lot of damage to me if there's so few of them, but in higher numbers, even the peasants can be a force to be reckoned with. Let's get the artifact. Responding to cries for help, you find river sprites making a sport of dunking an old man. Feeling vengeful, you rescue the man and drag a sprite onto dry land for a while. The sprite, uncomfortable in the air, gives you a magic pendant to let him go. You didn't like that sprite, did ya? Did ya, sprite? Not having access to water? As you're a water sprite, well, guess how the old man felt without having access to air. That'll teach him. Alright, I got the pendant of free will, which is mostly useless with this composition. I mean, the archers will not be affected by mind control, but that's not really a big deal. And the rest of my army is comprised of undead units, and the undead units cannot be mind controlled. Alright, most of this mission will be under the banner of Slow and Steady Wins the Race. I'm playing as the Necromancer. And that means that I don't really have much going for me other than strength in numbers as I gather up more and more skeletons. The Barbarian can be very aggressive because the early game units are quite powerful, they have a lot of attack, not all that much defense, so you want to attack with them rather than defend with them. The Warlock later on gains access to incredibly powerful black dragons, the only unit in this game that can be upgraded twice. But the Necromancer just relies on gathering up a bigger and bigger ball of undead troops. As he marches across the map and kills everything in his sight and resurrects it back as skeletons, his army grows and eventually he cannot be overcome. As soon as you reach that point, you can march across the map, conquering everything in sight, but before you reach that point, your army is quite fragile, and the moment you lose your army, the moment you lose your advantage in skeletons you've been working on the entire game, might very well be the moment you lose the entire game. Right, I'm giving the reinforcements to Lord Cologon, and something quite extraordinary has happened in comparison to my previous attempts. This time the enemy forces show themselves very early on. I think that at the start of the scenario, each of my opponents gets assigned a random personality. The fact that one of my opponents has shown himself so early on means that he's either an explorer or a warrior. Both of which are not exactly the sort of things I want my opponents to be, because explorers will just steal everything from the map, and warriors will attack me early on. And early on, I am not as powerful as I want to be. I definitely need time to grow, time to become unstoppable, to absorb everything from the map, and take it into my fold, assimilate it into my undead army. He's taking the chests, he's taking everything, it's Ruby, with a pretty pathetic army. But can I really afford to go after her right now, at the very start of the game? I don't really have much. I mean, I have a single bone dragon from the very start, and 8 vampires, and that's basically it. I've picked up the archers from a dwelling on the map early on. Notice how useful they are. They are the only ranged unit I have, so if I want to pick off anything from the distance, or deal even the tiniest bit of damage from safety, they are my go-to unit. Otherwise I'm just forced to move my army into battle and risk taking damage and potentially losing some of my units, which I certainly do not want. I want my army to grow, not to retain its numbers. Not to lose anything, but to grow. That's the only reason I'm attacking things like these peasants. I get the choice between leadership and ballistics. And it doesn't seem like much of a choice, does it? Leadership gives you more morale. And morale is only useful when it comes to units that are not undead. But there are the archers, and I may want to incorporate some more units that are not undead into my army. And having undead units in your forces is a strong deterrent to pretty much anyone who is not undead himself. Which means that leadership is basically a necessity unless you want him to freeze in fear quite often. But I chose ballistics anyway, because I don't think I will be getting too many units from a different castle, because undead units are quite decent. The bone dragons are fairly cheap to get and fairly good and effective, and while I value my archers, I may just exchange them for something more useful like the liches. Of course, liches can in some circumstances unfortunately deal friendly fire damage, but they are tier 6 and they pack quite a punch. Also, I have archers in my army right now without having any leadership. Are they freezing in fear? Are they losing their turns because of the fact that I have undead troops in my forces? No, they're not. They're mostly being targeted by other archers. There aren't too many of them, they are not freezing in fear, and overall, it's just them, so I don't think it would be justified to get leadership just for them and the possibility of maybe at some point getting some other units which are not undead. While ballistics will help me in all the sieges, seeing how I really lack any sort of units that are ranged. Of course I will have my flying units like the vampires and the bone dragons, but still, the mummies and the skeletons need to somehow get through the defenses. Especially the skeletons, since I plan on getting more and more of them through killing weak creatures. Like these archers, for instance. Or the peasants that litter the map, because of how this scenario is set up. You have the dirty rebelling peasants, and the glorious undead master race. Most of the battles in this scenario will be very one-sided. Will just be me slaughtering peasants and other weak creatures like these archers, for instance. Then again, this mostly is the case with scenarios anyway. Usually you just approach a force that is a lot weaker than you, and you kill it, and then you find another one that is weaker than you, and then you proceed to kill it. You don't usually approach forces that are stronger than you. That's usually ill-advised. And that's ill-advised in most circumstances in most games, isn't it? If you lose your best hero with your biggest army, he loses all of his artifacts, they go to the opponent, so they're not just destroyed, as in that you don't have them anymore, the opponent now has them. And you have to deal with that. With his artifacts, with his army, which of course is weakened from the encounter with you, but what do you have left? Whatever you can recruit from the castles you are left with, and from the heroes you are left with, which are mostly secondary heroes, not as well equipped as your main one. So at that point you have basically, in most cases, pretty much lost the scenario. And losing the scenario doesn't sound like such a dreadful thing, other than the fact that I simply do not reload saves. So if I lose a scenario, that's it, I have to restart it from the very beginning and try my best once again, which can get tedious. That's why I'm not making big plays left and right, that's why I am going for the low-hanging fruit. I did not attack the rangers, right? Rangers, tier 2 unit from the Knight's Castle, I did not attack them, because there's no point. I mean, sure, they would add some skeletons into my army, but at what cost? At what cost? After getting rid of my remaining archers, they would probably go for my skeletons, and I do not want that to happen. I want to gain skeletons, not lose them. I don't want to keep their numbers even. I don't care for the little experience I could have gotten from that fight. It's not a whole lot, it's not worth it at this point. But I did need access to the resources, so I did go for them, but when they ran, I felt no desire to pursue them. And acquiring resources is the name of the game here. Oh, I'm sorry, no it's not, it's Heroes of Might and Magic 2 Succession Wars. Silly me. Okay, I would love to erect some more buildings. I would, for instance, love to upgrade the mansion to get upgraded vampires, but that's costly, as you can clearly see. That's why you need to get them resources. And resources is something this game has in spades. So you need to run around the map and capture and flag for your team all of the resource generators so that you can finally build and upgrade your buildings. Exciting, isn't it? Well, then again, this is a strategy game, so I guess that's kind of the point. You get resources, you spend resources. You get some more resources, you build some army, and then you conquer some things. Duh. But still. That's just overkill with all these resources around. But I guess that's part of the charm. Oh look, Avalon! Avalon! If any of you actually got the reference, I'm kind of proud of you. And kind of surprised, quite honestly. I mean, I don't know whether that reference still exists. To be quite honest, it's reference to a beta I've once played. An early version of an MMO. That you might put in the comment section if you were lucky enough to actually get the reference. I don't think anyone on the web actually found this monologue to be so charming as I did. I haven't really... I've performed a Google search and haven't found a single site mentioning it. It might be out of the game at this point, which would be a goddamn shame, because it was wonderful. I know that most of you probably have no idea what I've been talking about for all this time, but unfortunately I can't even really help you, because I don't remember the monologue. I just remember hearing it and being endlessly amazed and entertained. It was very poetic. It was amazing. Great to hear. Unfortunately, I have never heard it again, and I did not manage to memorize it back then. So that's something I'll probably have to do in the future, but that's not relevant to what is on the screen now, is it? On the screen you've just seen a wonderful battle with archers. Wasn't that exciting? As already mentioned, most of this mission will be dealing with creatures like archers and peasants, until I'm strong enough to live without them. And here's a wonderful windmill that gives me even more resources. And of course I don't use chests to get resources. Why would I ever do that? I always use chests for their experience. This will be the death of me, I guess. And it might have already been the death of me sometimes, but hey, whenever I see a chance to get experience for my hero, I just go for it. I don't even consider getting gold. By the way, a choice between gold and ballistics. Yeah, I take ballistics on expert. I refuse to take such pitiful things as estates on my primary hero. He is needed for his combat prowess, not for his ability to manage estates and generate me more money. It's not like I want to have more creatures in my army or something. Well, perhaps I should have reconsidered. It's not like I am conquering castles left and right, so that I need to have ballistics on expert right this instant. And it's not like I really need anything else to have as my ability. So perhaps that was an odd choice on my part. The pattern I follow in these battles is fairly straightforward. I block the second and third archer, then I block the fourth and fifth archer, then I kill the one that is not blocked and proceed to kill the remaining ones if they are not dead already. It's not all that difficult to grasp as a concept, and that's when I'm dealing with ranged forces. Usually weak ranged forces, because I cannot afford to fight stronger ranged forces at this moment, because I do not want to lose my own forces in the process. And when it comes to melee troops, I will probably just stay behind and deal damage with my archers until I absolutely have to engage, at which point I will finally deal the damage that needs to be done. As cowardly as this may be, I just need to be on the safe side, because as I've mentioned, I do not look forward to restarting the scenario from the very beginning, as restarting usually works. I do, however, need some help around, because so far I have walked such a distance away from my main castle that getting reinforcements will be quite a bother. It can be done with a single hero to help me, such as the Alana, but there are other places on the map that need to be visited. And to visit them and to transfer the reinforcements when they are needed, I really could use 2 heroes to take care of these matters, with my main hero, of course, wandering around the map and taking care of things that require brutal falls and the army he possesses. I'm fighting archers yet again, and I will probably do the same thing. I just need to block 2 groups with my bone dragons, attacking one of them in the process, and then block 2 other groups with the vampires, leaving only 1 group free to fire. As you know, in this game, ranged units only deal half the usual damage when attacking in melee, which makes blocking them extremely useful and relatively safe. Of course, with the units that are not busy blocking, I am trying to defeat the 1 group of archers that could have attacked, but didn't, because of low morale. This is hardly surprising. I mean, even though the group is comprised of archers and archers alone, so they should feel camaraderie, I guess. Imagine facing such foes. Imagine being against bone dragons, mummies, vampires, an enormous group of skeletons, and some of your own people. Some competing archers firing at you from behind all these undead forces. Slowly marching towards you. Well, not necessarily slowly, but still. Would you have the courage? Would you have the morale? Would you stand up for yourself and fight for your life, or would you try to run away, or would you freeze in terror in face of such devastating forces? Well, either way, they're mine now. They will serve under my guidance. As mindless drones in my army, as skeletons raised from the dead. Our enemies are distant, and yet reinforcements are nearby. As a new week dawns, I can transfer the old reinforcements to Lord Collegon, with Diana's help. I should of course get the fresh batch from the castle that I have received today, but I won't get there in time. And I should probably start conquering the towns around me, so Elk's Head will be the first to fall. I am trying to quell a peasant rebellion, and what better way to do so than by pacifying the villages around me, establishing control over them. Of course, as they start working for me, I will also get additional benefits, such as the gold I can get from the taxes raised there. And perhaps some units I might be able to recruit. So far, however, I am facing quite a challenge in front of me, because there are quite a few units in this army, in this garrison. I might lose some units here, I will almost certainly lose some units. But first of all, I will get quite a few skeletons out of this encounter. And secondly, as I have mentioned before, I will gain control over the town, which is quite valuable indeed. In other words, this is an investment I am making. And as with most investments, the question is whether I will get a return on it. Will I at the very least break even? Which is not necessarily the result you want in a game. You don't want to just break even when accomplishing something. You definitely want to get better and stronger and further. You want to progress in the game. You don't just want to get stuck at a given point without losing, but without winning as well. Of course, getting some skeletons from this fight is a nice bonus. I have to appreciate that. Yes, having additional forces is nice. Ultimately though, I do not keep using the skeletons in battles. They are just a better objective that I am trying to accomplish. So at the very end, I will be able to face down my opponents with the skeletons when they are absolutely needed in the battle. But for now, they are not my top priority. My top priority is to get the resources I also want to get map control, and these things are tied together, of course, because you get resources from objectives on the map, such as the mines, and from castles, you get gold from the castles, so you need to control the castles on the map, and for that you need to have map control, and to have map control you need to have the forces necessary to secure the locations. So of course, to have these forces you need to have the resources to recruit them. It's as simple as that. I guess you could argue that this game tends to snowball out of control fairly quickly. And once it snowballs in your favor, it's very difficult to lose. Once it snowballs against you, it's very difficult to actually come back and win. I guess that's pretty much by definition what snowballing is, isn't it? Anyway, I had the choice between diplomacy and leadership. And I picked leadership because I already had leadership, so I chose to upgrade it instead of getting diplomacy and gumming up one of my skill slots on Lord Cologon. I also picked up a few archers from the newly conquered town. I'm in a difficult spot right now. I don't want to fight. I really don't want to fight the enemy heroes. If it is at all avoidable, I want to avoid instigating any fights, and I want to avoid getting into any fights. I don't want them to initiate any fights either. I don't want them to walk into my territory to start any fights. I am not strong enough yet. I do not want to confront them. They are fairly weak and I could probably defeat them right now if I had to, but they probably are running multiple heroes in all sorts of directions, so I'll just be chasing them around with Cologon, not getting anything done. So as long as I can avoid it, I will try to avoid it, unless it's really the low-hanging fruit. Also, here I encounter a bit of a dilemma. I have the rangers here, and I could chase them, or I could just let them run. If I let them run, I actually miss out on potential skeletons for my army. But if I do chase them, I can lose some of the loons I already have. Like for instance, I lost 2 archers already. I will of course block some of the rangers from firing. But still, these few shots they got off, they did a bit of damage. Of course, it's not really that much of a problem. I only lost 2 archers on my part, and I have gained 10 skeletons, so arguably it was a favorable trade. But still, these things are quite difficult to judge, and these are the sort of problems I still to this day have in this game. I sometimes have difficulty predicting whether a given army will absolutely crush another one, or if there will be losses. And if there are losses, how significant these losses will be. These things can be somewhat difficult for me, because I don't necessarily play the Heroes of Might and Magic games all that often. Even though I may, for better or worse, be associated with them, based on the fact that these are my most viewed videos. But as many of you have already pointed out, I am not all that great at them. But I'm trying my goddamn best. So here I am, getting a few more skeletons for my enormous skeletal army. And to get even more of them, I should probably engage even more troops on the map. Of course, I have to pick my fights, which, as I have already mentioned, is not all that simple, because you have to determine whether you are safe to attack a given group or not. And here I am, prancing around with an enemy hero on the other side, just waiting for me to get too close. Fortunately, he did not pounce, not this time anyway. Here's a sawmill and a group of rangers, which I will attack. Once again, to get more skeletons and to gain some experience. Because let's be frank, this map is littered with units, and I'm supposed to kill the units it is littered with. I could ignore them, I could just let them all flee, but what purpose would that serve? Yes, I would conserve some units, but what use are they to me anyway? The only purpose of these units is so that I can engage in fights. And if I lose some of them, then so be it. I am supposed to come out ahead overall, in terms of power, resources, what have you. Overall, I am supposed to come out on top. And the units are just one of the resources I have at my disposal in order to accomplish that. I'm not just going to tuck them away somewhere in a corner so that they may survive. This is simply not something that will help me to any extent. Of course, I do not want to lose them because I do not want to squander my assets, that's obvious. That much should be absolutely obvious to everyone. Between upgrading my pathfinding skill to expert and taking basic luck, I take basic luck. I do not need to have expert pathfinding to move quickly across these green meadows, which are the only sort of terrain I am currently facing. But I will need luck in the upcoming fights. Speaking of fights are pretty much the only use I can make of my units. And by engaging in fights, by engaging in battle, I'm obviously going to risk the lives of my units. So the only use I can make of them is through risking their very existence. And as such, there's no point in holding back, there's no point in just keeping them safe. If I am to make use of the assets I have in terms of units, I will need to sacrifice these units sometimes, and other times put them at serious risk, just to be able to do anything with them, because otherwise they are of no use to me at all. Now that I have made that point clear, you might have noticed that I have acquired vampire lords. I have finally been able to upgrade my mansion and get the upgraded vampires. I will be transferring them to Lord Coldragon shortly. And in the process, I should upgrade the vampires he already has. As I've mentioned before, this is a pain in the ass because, first of all, it's more costly than simply recruiting the upgraded version, and secondly, this requires a bit of time and a bit of manipulating when it comes to unit transfers. You need to give the original units to someone, then run that someone, in this case Darlana, to the castle, and then finally upgrade the units, come back with them, and return them to your original primary hero, in this case Lord Coldragon. As you can see, there's a bit of hesitation in my actions and a bit of commotion on the minimap, as I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want this transfer to go. I obviously have a lot of movement points on Lord Coldragon, but I intended to send Darlana with the reinforcements. Of course, this means that Lord Coldragon will be wasting a bit of his precious time waiting for the reinforcements to arrive, but unfortunately I don't have much of a solution for that. I could send him personally to the castle, but that would have taken even longer, believe it or not. So I have to go all the way to the castle with Darlana, upgrade the 10 vampires I have here, and bring them all the way back to Lord Coldragon. But back at the castle there's one more feat I may accomplish. I can get the first level of the Mage Guild. It may not be the most impressive set of spells you have ever seen, but it's something, right? I have Bless and Dispel Magic, as well as View Resources. Now, View Resources, like most adventure map spells, isn't really much of a fan favorite. And for a good reason, most adventure map spells are fairly useless. They do provide you with some information, although most of the time it's information you can't really act on, all the information you already have. The mostly waste of your mana. I mean, yes, sometimes if you want to know where a given castle is, view castles might be useful, but it's a fairly high level spell anyway. And of course there are a few adventure map spells which are extremely useful and obviously fan favorites, such as Dimension Door and Town Portal, because they can transport you quickly to a town, which is one of the few things you might still have problems with later on. Once you have an unbeatable army, you will sometimes simply need to return to your castle to defend it. Or just teleport somewhere and catch up to a pesky hero, flagging all your mines and causing havoc, in spite of having a pitiful army. Of course, that pitiful army may still be better than that of your secondary hero, so that's something to consider. And of course, as you are able to see, I was compelled to move Lord Coldragon into my castle of Sorpigal so he can learn the spells from the Mage Guild. I know they are low-level spells, but they are better than nothing, and of course, refreshing all of his mana points is worth something, although I don't think he has spent any, so that's somewhat of a moot point. But of course I can get the second level of the Mage Guild, and lo and behold, Death Ripple, Steelskin and Cold Ray. Of course, Death Ripple, as tempting as it sounds, will harm my archers. And I do not want that to happen. I know there's only 42 of them, I know most of my army is undead, but still, if I can avoid casualties, I should probably avoid casualties. Steel Skin, on the other hand, can be quite useful, as well as the direct damage spell I have gotten. Direct damage is always welcome. It's one of those things that you can appreciate almost regardless of circumstance. You can deal a bit more damage with a spell, great. I don't think anyone can argue with a bit of additional damage in pretty much anything, anytime. There really are better alternatives in most games, actually. Most of the time, if you can go for straight up additional damage, you will probably go for straight up additional damage. Of course, that's an enormous generalization under preferences and unoptimal plays in games, so I do not necessarily stand by it. So forget what I've said. Let's focus instead on more pertinent matters, such as the number of unrecruited mummies, which is currently at 6. Of course, the unrecruited mummies are here, alongside unrecruited vampire lords, while Lord Cologan is over there. He should be on his way. And if he is to go on his merry way, he will not get the reinforcements that he probably needs. 5 vampire lords are nothing to sneeze at, so I would certainly prefer to get the reinforcements, but should I really wait? Should I really? Because I don't think I will. Of course, there's a positive side to all of this. I will catch up to him quite quickly because Lord Cologan will be sidetracking quite a lot, defeating monsters, picking up stuff, and doing all the things that a primary hero does. Although, of course, a secondary hero should be following him and doing things like flagging mines, etc. That might not necessarily happen at this stage. I also do not have all the necessary funds to recruit all the vampire lords that are still in my castle of Sorpigol, but I do want to send as many units his way as I possibly can right now, so 6 more mummies, 2 more vampire lords. Hopefully they'll last him a long enough time. And now would be time to attack the town of Avalon after learning Bloodlust at the nearby shrine. Yes, Bloodlust should prove quite useful. Maybe. These forces aren't as formidable as they could have been. And do have in mind that I will gain a town after winning this battle. So this is once again an investment, an important investment that I'm making here. Unfortunately, the Bless spell cannot really be cast on my undead units. From this moment, my vampire lords will be dealing more damage, and not because of some phony god's blessing, but because of the bloodlust I have cast on them. Which is fair enough. I mean, these are vampire lords we are talking about. Lusting for blood should be something they are intimately familiar with. If you are not familiar with how vampire lords work, look at the number. There are 17 of them currently. They will get stabbed, the number will drop down to 16, and will rise back to 17 again once they deal damage, because they regenerate their numbers by killing enemy units. Or more precisely by simply dealing damage to them. They replenish their hit points, and they also replenish their ranks. Now you know, and knowing is half the battle. The other half is gruesome violence. We are conquering the town of Avalon, the name of which brings to my mind's eye memories of a monologue long forgotten. But fear not, for I have found a transcript on the web. My yearning finally fulfilled, the words which have eluded me for so long, finally in front of me, in all their glory. All of this I owe to a small Russian website that hosts the transcript. It might be the only source of this monologue available on the internet. Without further ado, listen to what John Galahad, the knight, has to say to Callista James, his squire.
Callista, pray leave me here to die. My cask is split in twain. I cannot speak.
This isn't the first hangover you've had. Come on, tell me about Avalon again.
Avalon! It's Lily the Mist's part, like an absent lover's kind welcome. Its sea cliffs are redoubted with cave and carving. There lies splendid orchards, fairy tables, a silent convent from whence I left in a matter of some disrepute. You tried that in a convent? John, what are you like? Among its dales no ungentle wind blows, and its verdant tuft springs untouched by rain, hail, or snow.
Wow. Are you sure that's in the UK? And that was it. I think at the end it used to say, are you sure that's in England? But at this point I can no longer be sure. It might be my memories failing me, it might be a different version of this dialogue, perhaps an earlier one from the one I have heard. Either way, I am fighting archers again as Avalon has fallen into my grasp. I am rapidly expanding my territory, my influence, and my stranglehold on the resources, with little to no opposition from the opponents. To their credit, they seem to be roaming on the outskirts, at the very edge of my field of vision. Far enough not to seem like a threat, but close enough to still discomfort me, to bring to my mind the inevitable necessity of pacifying them eventually. I will have to make preparations. And I am making said preparations by conquering these forces and expanding my undead army with every fallen soldier. My vampire lords can hold their own, they are sustaining themselves when fighting the archers, they are regaining their ranks with every attack. And my bone dragon, of course, although it is single and lonely, is still doing its job, it's still dealing all the damage it needs to deal, and is still able to perfectly block two groups of archers at a time, at the very start of each battle. I keep getting more and more archers, which are also a unit that absolutely has its place in my army, for now. They keep dealing the range damage that I need, and I even took archery to bolster that, at least for the time being. It will later on, of course, help my liches, which unfortunately are the only undead unit with a ranged attack. And as such, it may seem that getting archery was a bad call on my part, but I only chose to improve it, I already had it. Which means that I still get the benefits and do not waste the skill slot because it has already arguably been wasted before. I will of course pursue the peasants, as few of them as there are here, and I will kill all of them, in an effort to get even more skeletons. Obviously. Oh, by the way, have I mentioned that I want to get more skeletons, and that I will attack units such as peasants to get them? Because, you might have missed it. It's a fairly subtle strategic decision that may not be immediately obvious from the fact that I keep slaughtering everything on the map and have mentioned it during the last 40 minutes multiple times. Sheesh. Now, if you're familiar with the movie trope that the plan never works, this is kinda the opposite. In movies, usually if you have a plan presented to you, a clear outline of how the events should go, they will not go that way, because if they went exactly that way, there would be no surprise. What would be the point in watching the movie? You would get a plan outlined to you, you would get told this is the way things will go, and then you would watch things go that way. The end. Of course, this is largely different with video games. You can have the mission specifics outlined to in excruciating detail from the very get-go. You can be told from the very beginning something along the lines of survive for 30 minutes, and then you survive for 30 minutes. Or you don't. That depends on if you succeed or not. And if you do not succeed, well, there comes the twist, there comes the surprise, but it's your fault, isn't it? Because it's a video game, you control the events on the screen to a certain extent. And thus being in control means that the plan isn't as certain as it may sound. I mean, this is the way things should go, but is it the way things will go? You never know, because it depends on you and your actions. Of course, this is the way I have experienced it. The way you experience it right now is kinda different, because you're not playing a video game, you are watching me having played the video game. So, by the fact that I have posted it, you can already judge a few things. Most likely, it doesn't end in immediate failure early on, so I probably win. And if I win, I have probably accomplished the main objective, and since you know the main objective, you kinda have a rough idea of how things will go. You know that I will succeed, you know that I will not lose, and therefore, even if anything horrible happens at any point in this goddamn video, you know that I will eventually, in the end, win. I will somehow overcome all the difficulties that I face. I will prevail. And thus, knowing that I will prevail, you probably are not in the same sort of suspense I might have been playing through this mission. Not for the first time, mind you. Notice, for instance, that I have avoided attacking the Legion of Peasants. Now, why would that be? Because I have, in my previous attempts, attacked something like a Legion of Peasants. It does not end well. That is why next to my castle there is still a group of peasants. A group. It is a legion of peasants. There are many of them, and I mean many of them there. If I attack that group, I will lose almost everything I have. I will not necessarily lose outright, but I will lose most of my forces, and that's never a good thing. Attacking a legion of peasants would result in me being severely crippled, and from that, failure would follow soon enough. Instead of making the foolhardy move of attacking enemies I could not possibly conquer, I have gotten the liches. The liches will supplement my army with the ranged attacks. Now the problem is, I only have 5 slots for units, as this is Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and you only have 5 slots and 6 tiers of creatures. But even though I only have 5 tiers of creatures available at my castle, I already have 5 slots in my army filled because of the archers, and there are quite a few of the archers, over 100 of them. I do not necessarily wish to get rid of them. I have, by the way, found the Endless Cult of All, which will keep giving me all every turn. I like these economical artifacts, as I refer to them. They increase my income in resources without the necessity of defending an external structure. You just need to keep the artifact on hand at all times, and you will be safe. Now you can even hand it off to a secondary hero, as long as that secondary hero is deep enough in your own territory for it not to ever matter, for him never to get attacked without your primary hero getting defeated first, at which point you have probably lost anyway. You will keep the artifact to yourself for the rest of the game. Now there are edge cases, of course. There are instances in which you could lose your secondary hero without losing a fight with your primary hero. For instance, you might get attacked by someone using Dimension Door or a spell of this sort. Now keep in mind, you may just keep your secondary hero in your castle with a huge enough army to be able to defend against such attacks at certain points, or if worst comes to worst, you can always just go back and reclaim the artifacts you have lost by attacking the attacker of your secondary hero, if you do manage to catch up to him, and if you still have a free artifact slot. I mean, it can get a little bit more complicated, and there are scenarios in which this can pose a problem, but if you have an enemy with a powerful army running around with Dimension Door across the map and conquering your castles, losing the economic artifacts might be the least of your worries at that point. Of course, some of the fights I take just to increase my army, but this is a fight I took because I want to have access to this laboratory. I am expanding my control far to the west. I am straying from my homeland quite a bit, from my home base, from the castle of Solpigol. I am dangerously far away. But I do need to make such excursions, and I do need to gain more territory, to flag more mines, to flag more... well, laboratory isn't necessarily a mine now, is it? But it's still a resource gathering structure that I need to keep under my control. There's a second laboratory over here, which I have not yet flagged, but since I was heading north, not south anyway, I might as well flag the north one. Of course, flagging the south one would seem like a decent idea, but to flag the south one I would have to expand in the southern direction, and I'm not expanding in the southern direction because the southern area seems to be crawling with enemy heroes. I do not wish to attack them just yet, and mostly I do not wish to open them access to my territory by attacking the stack of neutral units that is basically guarding my area. That single stack of units is basically a caulk, preventing the enemy heroes from spilling into my territory. and conquering all the towns and mines that I have acquired so far. Let it remain there for the time being. Despite the relative safety at the bottom of the map, and my main forces being at the top, I have been assaulted from the middle. Which means I need to return to my territory immediately to protect my towns and castles. To do so, by tracing back my own footsteps and by going back the roundabout way, I would be wasting time. I would be letting my enemies conquer everything I have ever owned and leave with relative impunity. I cannot allow that. That is why I am going south. This is the shortest path, this is the way which will cut off the ways of escape, and this is the way along which I will conquer yet another castle for my own. This feat should not be all that difficult considering the fact that there are no enemy heroes to protect it. Though the hired commander is certainly an improvement over not having anyone to lead the forces, he is still laughable in comparison to even the weakest of heroes that could have stayed here. Death Ripple, as you might have noticed, hurts all units which are not undead, including my own archers. This is an unfortunate side effect. In the hands of someone whose army is comprised exclusively of undead units, this might be a powerful spell. Not an amazing spell, but a powerful spell nonetheless. It will deal damage to all of the opponent's units, assuming all of them, once again, are not undead. The assumption is true most of the time, and yet, in my situation, using Death Ripple might not be all that wise. The archers have served me well, and there's over 100 of them. I might want to take good care of them. I have very little time left as the enemy forces are drawing closer and closer to the heart of my territory with each turn. But I figured I should probably visit this new conquered city to see what it can provide me with. And lo and behold, it can give me the spell Animate Dead, which permanently returns my undead units to life. It has also bestowed upon me direct damage spells, which I greatly appreciate. Now, of course, the ability to use spells is predicated upon a hero's wisdom skill, which is not necessarily the sort of skill every hero will have, and is certainly not typical of knights, which Lord Collegon is, despite his dabbling in necromancy. So that's something I might want to take into consideration. Of course, there are 3 levels of wisdom, as there are 3 levels of each of the skills. Basic wisdom allows you to cast tier 3 spells, advanced wisdom, tier 4 spells, and finally expert wisdom gives you access to tier 5 spells. The spell I was excited about, the spell that returns undead units to unlife permanently, was a tier 3 spell, which means basic wisdom, at the very least, is required to use it. This is something I'll have to check later on. However, for now, considering the fact that I may be able to upgrade my archers into rangers, I've decided to take a short break here, trade some resources for gold, and upgrade as many of the archers as I possibly can, preferably all of them. 105 rangers sounds definitely like a better deal than 105 archers, considering the fact that rangers shoot twice. These are quite drastic measures I'm undertaking. It's not the greatest amount of resources I've ever traded away, but it is at a crucial point in the game. These resources could have been spent on buildings or on upgrading existing buildings, on further developing my towns and castles. Instead, they are spent on gold to upgrade the archers and rangers. They are spent on my army. Hopefully I can accumulate even more resources as the game progresses, and this will not hurt me in the long run. However, I am robbing myself of the advantage I used to have in this respect. But I am of course trading it for a different sort of advantage, and I am getting a few more rangers from here as well, to go with the rangers I already have, after the extremely costly training. The time has come to show our might, to test our mettle against the enemies who have brazenly strolled into our territory. Their insolence shall not go unpunished. The treacherous bastards shall be made an example of. Let us not overlook that this wanton rebellion is destabilizing the integrity of our kingdom, turning baron against baron in an unnecessary civil war. Archibald is the rightful ruler of this land. Roland's unwillingness to admit defeat and accept his place in the hierarchy is what perpetuates the violence we are engaging in. If he truly cared for the welfare of his fellow citizens, he would have stopped the bloodshed by simply renouncing his claim to the throne. He continues to assert power, sending countless people to their deaths in a desperate bid for supremacy he cannot possibly achieve. Untrained and ill-equipped, the peasants blindly sacrifice themselves for a lord that cares only about his status and influence. For everyone's sake, I hope this conflict ends soon. The events in the west have prompted my return to Wheatpatch in an attempt to defend the castle I have recently conquered. With half a dozen champions by my side, I have dug myself in and am awaiting the assault, which may actually never come. My secondary heroes are on their way to Solpigol to strengthen its defenses by their mere presence. It may not be much, but it just may be enough. Half of them went to the east, the other half of them went to the west, putting me in a difficult spot. I may either pursue the attackers, head to the east and defend my castle, therefore losing Wheatpatch, or I may go to the west to defend Wheatpatch and possibly risk losing Solpigol. It's a difficult situation, as I have already noted, but I think in these circumstances I will rely on the forces in Solpigol and perhaps on my secondary heroes to defend it, while I will head to the west, pursue the heroes that have fled there, and defend our newly acquired castle. Since if I destroy the enemies to the west, I will have first of all uncovered more territory, so that I may know if attacks are coming or not later on. And I will have also defended one of the castles and trapped one of the attackers to the east of me. If he chooses to actually engage, fight to conquer Solpigol, I will be in the exact position I need to be to cut off his escape paths and to crush him as he tries to flee from my territory. Whereas if I went to the east initially, I would have almost certainly lost Wheatpatch and would have to go back there and reconquer it again. Meanwhile, by that point my foes would have undoubtedly opened up several vectors of attack into my territory and would have struck from the north, from the south and from the center, trying to take down Solpigol once again. Visiting the Xanadu strengthens Lord Collegan, and he should now definitely have what it takes to retake Solpigol, which will undoubtedly fall soon enough. What remains to be seen is whether my gambit was a worthwhile one, whether losing Solpigol was worth keeping Wheatpatch for a few more turns, whether going west, uncovering more territory, was worth it to actually forsake the territories to the east for a brief while, and to allow my enemies to scout over here and to attack the very heart of my territory. I do not have the resources to recruit as many units as I would like to. My previous decisions have come back to haunt me, as all the resources I have spent on acquiring rangers are now unavailable to help me in the siege that is yet to come. I need to trade away even more, simply so as not to let my forces fall into the enemy hands. In my deplorable poverty, I was only able to scrounge up about 2,000 gold pieces. I ordered a moat to be dug alongside our castle walls, the bare minimum of castle defenses. My forces are laughably small, my odds similarly minuscule. My opponent's army is laughably small when compared to one of my main hero. Unfortunately, it seems big enough to be able to take care of my garrison over here in Solpigol. I will do my very best to stave them off as long as I possibly can. Rest assured, my undead forces will not go down without a fight. My number one priority is to eliminate the ranged units. Once I deal with them, the castle's defenses should be able to deal fairly significant damage to what remains of the enemy's force. I do not necessarily believe that victory here is achievable, but I should minimize the losses I will incur once Lord Coldagon engages this enemy force. Any degree to which I can thin out the enemy forces is preferable to just letting all of them stand. Of course, as time goes on, the catapult will keep wailing away at my towers, eventually reducing them to rubble. For now, my static defense can deal at least a bit of damage. On a positive note, for what it's worth, I only have a single tower to care about because the remaining ones cannot shoot. I have not gotten the left or right tower yet. Since the central tower is the only one I worry about and it's the last thing to fall, the last thing for the catapult to target, I should not worry about running out of shots on my static defense anytime soon. I am fairly certain that my forces will die sooner than that. The end draws near, inevitably. I can try to eliminate the last few remaining archers and rangers. That's a difficult task to accomplish with the forces I am left with. Even the peasants are doing their part right now, but they shall soon fall, and with them any defenses I have had in this castle of Solpegal. Even though I have a fairly long way ahead of me, I will get there eventually. I have already moved Darlana into safety, and I will get a few more archers with her to bolster my forces whenever I can. I have lost my third tier hero, which was an unfortunate turn of events. But soon enough I will reclaim Solpegal and everything will be fine once again. Of course, this is the unfortunate way things are in this game quite often. Once you leave a certain place, your enemies strike there, avoiding your main force, avoiding your most powerful hero, just striking wherever they can, whenever they can. It's so obscenely annoying. They have these fairly weak splinter forces that you need to deal with constantly. If you keep chasing after them, another force will do something else somewhere in your territory. If you do not chase them at all, they will just ruin you. They will strike everywhere at once, and they will continue to pester you until you lose. All you will be left with will be your main force, and your main force without getting any reinforcements from your castle, without getting any resources from the mines on the map, from resource gathering nodes on the map. Without the resources you will not be able to upgrade your castle, without upgrading your castles you will not be able to defend them, you will not be able to get more units. Without more units you will not be able to defend the castles by themselves or with your hero, you will not be able to bolster the forces of your main hero, and ultimately you will lose. You will lose a slow and painful game. You will lose in the war of attrition, which is one of the most painful ways to lose, because you feel constantly on the back foot in such circumstances. It doesn't feel like you've done something horribly wrong at a particular point and that lost you the game. It feels as if you just either keep doing things wrong over and over, or there's something just wrong with the world, with the game. There's something ultimately so wrong that it cannot be traced to a particular event. You cannot put your finger on it, you just know that something is not right. But what is it? What could it possibly be? By the way, look at my rangers dealing so much damage. And they have high morale despite my undead troops. And they get lucky. Just dispatching the titans, brilliant. Either way, it's just horrible in this game to lose due to attrition. And it's all the more relevant since I am playing the necromancers. I mean, the necromancers are supposed to snowball eventually. They are supposed to grow and grow and grow and become powerful. And once they become powerful, they are supposed to continuously keep becoming even more and more powerful, because they are the necromancers. They are supposed to raise the dead and become more powerful as more foes die. So of course they are ultimately fairly weak, but they make up for that by growing more powerful as they defeat more enemies. So it's difficult to balance them, obviously. And therefore, an argument can be made that playing the Necromancers on a small map is a fairly bad idea, while playing them on a big map gives them an enormous advantage, because you have the chance to wander around on the map, collect all the things, kill neutral creatures, grow more powerful, and then you can crush your opponents. That's how it usually is supposed to go. Whereas on a small map, you get faced with enemy forces early on and you probably lose because they will be more powerful than you. Because these castles operate differently. I mean, it can be argued that such a design creates imbalances. It creates imbalances naturally and therefore is bad design. But it's a common argument against asymmetrical forces, isn't it? If you have forces that differ in pretty much any sort of way, then an argument can be made that these things are ultimately imbalanced because they work in different ways. And therefore, on the same map, one force will have an advantage over another. But does it mean that we always should have the same forces against the same forces? Should we always only have absolute symmetry when trying to battle one another? Should we only have a single castle facing the same castle on a given map? Is achieving complete and absolute balance worth it? Or does it make a boring game? Of course there are no easy answers to this, and of course every time you have asymmetrical design, someone will be out there to complain, and someone will claim that one of the armies, one of the factions, one of the forces is stronger than the other. And they will claim so at times even unconditionally, that they simply are better. And of course arguments can be made that no, they are simply better in these particular circumstances, but ultimately that's because of this single mechanic or the combination of these mechanics, and if you place them in different circumstances then it's a different matter entirely. But of course then an argument can be made that if you have a certain map, if you have these certain circumstances, which you usually do, then the choice of the map, for instance, or the choice of, I don't know, terrain or something, that a certain factor that is pre-established before the match even begins can determine whether a given player can almost determine whether a given player will win or lose, or at the very least whether he will have a huge advantage or be playing from behind, or will be playing from a huge deficit because of the way the map is designed, or because of the way something is designed at the very beginning of a given scenario or at the beginning of the match. And therefore one might argue that the game will not be as compelling to watch, because from the very beginning, from the moment you learn what the conditions of the game are, not the winning conditions, but the conditions of play, the map size or the map kind or placement of certain objects, etc. And from that very moment you will know how certain things will likely play out, assuming competent players who know what they are dealing with and who know how to play the given game. And of course, quite a few things have happened in the background as I was discussing this, but you know, you have seen them for yourselves, and hopefully you were able to pulse them without my active commentary. But for those of you who have missed it, perhaps due to treating this video as a podcast of sorts, hello! I have pretty much lost all the things. I have reconquered Sobigor, killed 2 heroes, and I'm about to go to defend Wheat Patch, the castle I have conquered. Of course I have lost the 2 towns I have conquered, the one to the north and the one to the west. But Wheat Patch is what matters right now. I need to do my goddamn best to actually to defend it on one hand, but I won't be able to realistically defend it against these heroes, so I need to reconquer it soon enough. And while I still can, I should recruit all the forces over here to make a final stand and to kill as many of the enemy units as they possibly can in the upcoming siege. 3 enemy heroes, 4 of them near the castle of Wheat Patch. So this will be difficult. This will be pretty much impossible to handle. And as such, I am not really delusional enough to believe that I can defend against all of this and reach this place with Lord Coldagon in time to actually defend it, to fend off all the enemy heroes attempting to conquer my castle. I do not believe that my castle can withstand this siege, this terrible onslaught. Look at this, for instance. There go my champions. And that should give you a bit of an insight into how powerful the enemy hero is, and you need to take into the account that there are such things as hero statistics like attack and defense, and that the difference between the attack and defense of creatures is what amplifies or decreases the damage that they deal to one another. And that, of course, the stats of a hero are added up to the stats of a given creature. And in these particular circumstances, I do not have a hero. I just have this little guy trying to add to my forces at the tiniest of bits of stats and trying to cast the simplest of spells. So obviously I am no match for an actual hero. There's a reason why this game is called Heroes of Might and Magic. There is a huge advantage to fighting with a hero, as opposed to fighting without a hero. Well, first of all, you cannot even move your armies around the map without a hero to guide them. That should be a huge tip-off, but you can have forces on their own defending a castle. Unfortunately, the bonuses still apply when a hero attacks your castle, and there will never be a situation when an army without a hero will attack your castle. That's just not possible due to what I have mentioned previously. Therefore, there will always be a hero attacking your castle if your castle gets attacked. And if you do not have a hero in your castle to defend it, then even though you get defender's advantage from being behind castle walls, you still will lose the stat wall. When fighting neutral forces on the map, if you have an army of the same exact size, you will win because you have a hero, alright? However, if you have the same exact forces inside a castle without a hero, and outside a castle laying siege with a hero, the forces with the hero in most circumstances will win, because having a hero of a particular strength is likely to outweigh having castle defenses, a moat, towers, etc., which do not really scale all that much. There are a few things you can build to keep the castle more secure, but there are limits to that. There are very strong limits. You erect all these structures, you have the two additional towers, and you have the moat. You may have fortifications if it's the knight's castle, and that's it. They will not become more powerful at all. Of course, there is probably a threshold. There's probably a situation imaginable where if you have a very, very, very weak hero with the army of the same size on both sides and very, very, very strong castle defenses, as in everything built all the way up, then maybe the defending forces still win because of the castle defenses and the additional damage the towers provide and the additional protection the moat provides and the castle walls provide. However, as I have mentioned previously, the hero's growth in power eventually outweighs this and provides the advantage to the attacking side. Not because the attacking side has advantage in general, it absolutely does not. The attacking side is at a disadvantage, but if you're fighting against someone who does not have a hero, you absolutely do have the advantage due to having the hero, as I have mentioned ad nauseum over the last few minutes. Now, the fatal flaw of these hypothetical scenarios is just how utterly hypothetical and counterfactual they are. Most of the time in this game, you do not fight with armies of similar strength. And obviously, if you fight armies of similar strength, most of the time both sides have a hero. Because you cannot really have a fight with neither of the sides having a hero. So if you actually fight a hero with a similarly sized army, one of them comes on top, and the one that comes on top usually just snowballs the situation out of control, pushes his advantage, and wins, ultimately. So that's that one encounter in most matches, that single encounter when the tide gets turned, when someone gets the upper hand, and when someone basically secures his victory. because everything after that is just busy work. It's cleanup. It's reflagging all the mines, getting all the castles back under your control. There's usually a single fight, a single battle that decides all of it. Everything before it leads up to it, everything after it is a result of it. I mean, in some circumstances, I guess the situation could end up in a wash, and both sides might just want to back off and try to regroup and try to once again have that single glorious battle. The alternative, I guess, would be for one side to make egregious mistakes. For instance, lose important castles, not reconquer them in time. Just overall, perhaps not expand as aggressively, not get the necessary resources, not flag the necessary mines. Just make mistakes here and there, and make mistakes that add up to a huge difference in the size of the armies. In such a situation, of course, the battle will be extremely one-sided, and the side that wins will quickly clean up and claim victory. In such a situation, there would be 0 equal battles, and the game would be even more landslidey than it already is. It would snowball out of control in the very beginning, with no hope of coming back for the weaker side. I guess one can argue that that's actually a good thing, because if comeback mechanics of some description were included in this game, the missions might have been even longer than they already are. As it is, once you accomplish certain objectives, once you get a certain number of castles, etc., your opponents cannot really win, but they can stall out. And they cannot win assuming you don't mess up, assuming you still are meticulous, are patient, are careful. If you still keep track of your castles, keep recruiting forces in them, keep getting reinforcements to the main hero, but also keep protecting the castles you have, keep track of the enemy heroes, and so on and so forth. But most of the time you do that. So then it becomes a matter of the weaker side just pestering the stronger player, just being everywhere, trying to take his things, unsuccessfully, running away, running all around the map with the heroes that side may have. It's not really productive. The stronger side, of course, tries to prevent all of this, tries to kill all the wayward enemy heroes, tries to reflag all the things with his secondary heroes. He might lose some of the secondary heroes. Of course, that's a sign of a certain level of inattention on his part. Right now, as you can see, my efforts are focused on defense. I would like to get on with the offense. I would like to conquer new castles. I would like to, first of all, retake Wheatpad, but it's just not happening in the very short term. First of all, I need to take care of these heroes running amok on my territory, especially so that they don't kill Darlana, who has in her possession quite a few economic artifacts. I do not want the enemy heroes to get that advantage, because they can simply run away and get recruited back by my enemy with the artifacts they gain from killing her. Of course, I could conceivably just run away with Darlana and recruit her back, but what would the point of that be? Let's not get her in danger in the first place. Besides, I do not want these heroes running around and reflagging mines for their own. I need the resources from them. I do not want to just let them run amok on my territory. I could just flag new mines, I could get new castles, but that's not the sort of scenario I like. That's not the sort of situation I want to get myself into. It's just... it's not a good feeling to be in the heart of enemy territory with everything else just flagged for the enemy, or perhaps to be in the enemy's territory with the enemies, with allegedly the enemy's mines flagged for your own, and with your mines, the mines you started with, or the mines you conquered early on in the game, with them being flagged for the enemy. It's basically switching places with your opponent. And are you really satisfied with trading places? Do you really want to have that happen? Do you want to have the enemy's castle? Do you have less faith in your ability to build up a castle than you have in your enemies? I don't think so. That's not the sort of approach I want to take. So I want to keep what I have, and then I want to get more. Now, I usually get this feeling, and it's a misguided intuition. It's absolutely wrong, but you can get the feeling when doing a thing like this. You can get the feeling that you are wasting your time, that you are losing time doing this, and that your opponent in the meantime is gaining an advantage, that he's gaining an advantage over you because you are just running around killing his secondary heroes. You are wasting time doing so, meanwhile he's growing in strength. Oh, by the way, Week of Plague, it's just amazing, brilliant. Anyway, it's not a waste of time. It's absolutely not a waste of time, because to get new heroes, he needs to spend resources, and I'm fairly certain that from distracting you with the heroes running around in your territory, he is gaining a lot less than he is losing by letting them die over and over and over. Besides, you're getting experience from defeating these heroes, so you're also gaining something from that. Of course, you may be losing some of your units in battle, in case the secondary heroes are powerful enough to pose a significant enough threat. But if they do pose a significant enough threat, you need to take care of them all. Because in such a case, they actually do, as I have mentioned, pose a threat to you. To your main hero, to your castle, especially to your secondary hero and any tertiary heroes you might have. In such a case, it is vital to take them out. And if they have a decent army, that means that that army had to come from someplace, right? It absolutely did. So it's a part of the enemy's forces that when you eliminate, it will not come back. It's an investment that the enemy has made, and that once you eliminate it, you have gained an advantage in the terms of taking away from him what he once invested, taking away his resources in terms of his standing army. These were resources spent on getting that army. You are therefore destroying that investment if you manage to efficiently get rid of the enemy army. Efficiency is key here, as in most games, because if you do not take them out efficiently, if they actually make better you... The yellow player has somehow been eliminated in the midst of all of that. Now that's good news in a way, but in more ways I would argue it's bad news. It's good news because it's one less opponent I have to care about, you could argue. But again, what does that mean? They are working together anyway. As far as I know, they are working together against me. So if one of them just went away, the remaining two will share the resources he had. Now that means that they now have more resources than they originally did. Although obviously he got eliminated over a period of 7 days of not controlling a castle, so they have had these resources. They have had access to them for quite a while now. And I still have no idea how exactly this happened. But I do need to deal with the consequences nonetheless. There are so many enemy heroes right now swarming my territory. I will have to mount a defense, especially of my main castle, and of this territory in general in the perspective. For now, my number one task is to eliminate Ruby, who is dangerously close to Solpegal. Next turn she would be able to attack it, and possibly conquer it, although not necessarily likely considering how small of an army she has. Then again, if you actually take a look at the numbers, my army isn't all that imposing either. I do have over 1,000 skeletons, which is something I can be proud of as a necromancer, but other than that, it's quite a mixed bag. My champions have just been killed. All of them. They are dead. I have a few vampire lords, but they just might get stabbed to death. And I have my rangers, of whom I have been proud throughout this scenario. They have been helping me quite a lot, and I really appreciate their participation in my opponent's demise. My losses haven't been all that horribly huge or impactful, but still my forces are dwindling from fight to fight. I do have a large collection of skeletons, and that's about it. It's a growing collection of skeletons, don't get me wrong. My army of skeletons is definitely increasing in its size. But all the other units are not getting reinforced all that well. I don't have that many of them. I should probably try to take care of that. Then again, it's a vicious circle. I don't really have too many of them. So if they get into fights, they get counterattacked and then they die, and then there's even fewer of them, which means that, yes, my skeletons who stay in the back lines get to grow unopposed. My rangers deal range damage, so if no one is out there determined to kill them with a spell or something like that, as my flying creatures block any threats to them, my rangers can remain safe. Alright. This fight with Realdo is important for a number of reasons. First of all, he is posing an existential threat to me. He is very close to my castle, and I don't like that, quite frankly. It's one of the last remaining resources I have at my disposal. Most of my mines have already been flagged by the enemy. Pretty much all I have right now is my castle, which I desperately need to defend. The other reason this fight is important is because his forces are decently sized. As much as I would like to deny it, my forces, even though formidable, especially because of the skeletons, are not all that overwhelming in size. I will of course win here, so I'm not panicked, I'm not terrified of his forces. He will run away. I will not get to finish him off, which upsets me to a small degree. Of course, in this game, if you feel like you will just lose everything and you can't deal any more damage that will be significant without passing a turn and then letting your opponent kill you, finish you off, you might as well run away. You will lose all the remaining forces you've had, but you will keep your artifacts and your hero. And that can be extremely important. Then you can re-recruit them in the tavern and equip them with an army again and again and again. It doesn't work that well on main heroes, because once they run away, sure, they get to keep everything they've had, but what was important about them, what made them the main heroes, wasn't necessarily just the fact that they had the highest level of all the heroes you were controlling, or the fact that they had the most artifacts. It was also the army they have mustered, they have gathered throughout the entire match. If you lose all of that in an unfavorable trade, things can just get nasty. Of course, it might be after the even encounter where you feel like you will lose anyway, but if you already had dealt the damage you needed to deal, if you were efficient with your forces, if you have made a significant enough impact, even though you lose that particular fight, if you get to keep your hero and can reinforce him in another castle and your opponent will not have a bigger army, maybe that's exactly what you need to do. In most circumstances, just losing your hero, giving up all the artifacts he has gathered and such, and not being able to recruit him in the tavern once again, is pretty pointless. Of course, losing any given fight is a bad idea, and you should avoid doing that most of the time. But if you are about to lose, you probably should run away. And this is also quite annoying, because why wouldn't you run away? That's why your opponent will try to finish you off as quickly as he possibly can, because otherwise you can just run away and get right back to annoying him. Running around on the map, flagging things, maybe having some sort of a 45 rangers have perished. And I was just about to mention something else. Something related to the series, related to the big picture of things, but look at this fight, look at these enemy forces. My liches are already dead and have been dead for quite a while now, but I'm facing a quarter of 1,000, oh my, a quarter of 1,000 halflings, 30 archmages. My vampire lords are regenerating, replenishing their ranks slowly, but I've lost all the rangers, all the liches. So all that remains now are a few archers scratch that. All that remains now are a few vampire lords and my skeletons. And my vampire lords are not necessarily going to stay alive much longer, considering the trouble they got themselves into. I know they have regen, I know they can replenish their ranks, but they are about to go down. How many of them there are only 11 of them left. And the Archmages retaliate. The Archmages can, as far as I remember, attack in dealing full damage in melee range, which is something unusual for ranged creatures, because ranged creatures in... Whoa! Holy... 216 halflings just got back up on their feet, got resurrected. So all that remains now are my prized skeletons. And I am losing quite a few of them as well. I've lost almost everything, but gained the Dragon Sword of Dominion, Traveler's Boots of Mobility, amazing artifact, Black Pearl, also amazing, and the Sack of Gold, great economic, and this Bag of Gold, even more gold, and this Purse of Gold! Caster's Bracelet of Magic, Pendant of Life, Giant Flail of Dominion, Gold Watch, and I gained some skeletons. There might have been more artifacts, but what happens in such a case, when you run out of spaces, is the remaining artifacts get permanently destroyed. I don't think it's possible to destroy an artifact in any other way, but if you run out of spaces and you're supposed to be given an artifact, they will just disappear permanently. So I might have just wasted a few amazing things that could have been mine. Sheesh. But quite a few of these artifacts are quite significant benefits to me. They are nice boons. They are amazing advantages. I'm still reeling over the fact and mulling over the fact that I have lost almost all of my forces except for the goddamn skeletons that I have been amassing this entire match. Quite terrifying circumstances these were. Almost everything on the map has been flagged by my enemies. The only castle I have remaining is my starting castle of Salpigol. This was not a deadly blow to me, considering the fact that I was able to finish off the enemy's hero. And I have gotten all the artifacts, well, I have gotten at least a part of the artifacts my opponent has had. And I have eliminated that hero from the hero pool at least for a little while. So that's good news. Because even though I have lost quite a few of my undead troops, I still have the skeletons. And more importantly, I still have control over my castle. Now the bad news is that my opponents have more castles than that. So I need to be more expansive. I need to go out there and conquer things while I still can, while the economic advantage does not just allow my opponents to steamroll over me, because they are currently getting all the resources from all the mines they have flagged that used to belong to me, and the ones that did not belong to me previously, the ones that they have flagged, well, I can't even see. I will get Elk's Head. We've got a few archers, not a significant amount. Nothing like the good old glory days of having so many rangers by my side. Not a significant amount of archers. Only 4 liches to my name. So my ranged forces are pretty weak overall. Of course these are power liches, but 3 of them just died. Struck by a single lightning. Well, let's say a single lightning, I guess. This represented multiple lightnings, but you know how it is in Heroes of Might and Magic. You have these troops with numbers on them, and supposedly these are just huge amounts of creatures, even though you don't see them as such. Which probably is for the best. Of course, I'm slowly losing my vampires. Almost all of my power liches are dead. I have a few mummies, but how much are you willing to bet that they will remain alive for a decent amount of time. I actually moved my mummies though instead of blocking the titans so that my skeletons could get to the titans, but guess what? My skeletons could not move far enough. Of course, all of my archers are now dead, but my single power lich will remain alive for now. I should be able to kill the titans with my skeletons because I have so many of them. And with a single... finding an expert will be great. With a single power lich and a single ancient mummy remaining, a royal mummy rather, a single royal mummy and a single power lich, aside from the skeletons, you probably have noticed that the structure of my army has been altered significantly. And it'll remain as such for quite a while, I guess, before I get a chance to rebuild and replenish my forces, which will take literally weeks, at least of game time. For now I have to rely on my skeletons, because I don't have anything else to rely on. Fortunately, there are quite a few of them, so I can rely on them. Unfortunately, now that I can only rely on my skeletons, people will try to take my skeletons down. And since they are a tier 1 creature, they do not have all that much health. They are, for some weird reason, the most powerful tier 1 creatures. But they can still be taken down, as you have no doubt noticed right now. Only 1,249 of them left, or some prefer to say 1,249. And quite a few more of them will fall before I get this castle. Not to speak of any other conquests I might have planned. But I need additional castles, I need more mines, I need to regain control of the territory, because if I just remain passive trying to amass an army, I will die. And even though I don't have the amazing army I would like to have, I need to make use of what I do have. I desperately do. Which shows that throughout the years I have actually learned quite a bit about this game. I finally understand that you need to be aggressive, even if you don't really have all the... A power ring, that's something I can appreciate. Even if you don't have the most amazing army, the most powerful of heroes, you still need to do things on the map. Because if you do absolutely nothing, you will not become more powerful eventually and crush your opponents. Because doing things and successfully accomplishing things is almost always better than just waiting for some trust fund of yours to pay off in the end. No, you need to consciously and actively keep making investments and keep taking risks. Otherwise you will accomplish absolutely nothing. You can just sit around and wait for everything to fall in its place, because it will not. It will absolutely not. You need to take action, which I guess, overall, is an important life lesson. And unlife lesson, considering that I'm playing the undead. Fortunately, I saved the game here and took a little break, coming back to it later on. Now, why do I say fortunately? Because of this holy corrupted footage, Batman! What the hell is going on? What the hell has transpired in the meantime? Well, I will explain all of these things to you very, very soon. And it's not all that complicated, and not much time has been lost here. About a quarter of time, I believe. A few turns at most. It's not all that significant of an impact, and I will not be replaying this. Not a goddamn chance. Of course, saying minutes of time is redundant, because minutes already are the measure of time. On the other hand, saying 15 of time, or 15 units of time, would be ambiguous, because you wouldn't know which units of time I had in mind. But I would rather make this correction post-factum than just go ahead and edit the previous statement, because that's more things for me to say in this incredibly long playthrough. Anyway, there are things I was about to tell you, and there are things I need to tell you for you to be up to speed on the current events. As you can see, my army isn't all that bigger. although I have gotten a few units here and there. It seems like they were only from a single week of recruitment. I do have a single bone dragon now, which means that I got the laboratory, which is one of the things that have occurred. I have also retaken quite a few of the mines. I also have the western castle, well, the castle west, relatively to my position, relatively to the area of the map, I have uncovered so far. It's actually closer to the middle of the entirety of the map. I have not yet conquered the town, I think, in the top right corner, in the northeastern corner, but I will get on that quite soon. I have, however, conquered the town in between my two castles, because that was simple enough to accomplish. In fact, now that I look at it, I did get the town in between the two castles and the second castle before the crash occurred, so that's not much of an issue. The only thing that might be a surprise to you is the fact that I have conquered all the mines in the northeastern region, which shouldn't be all that much of a surprise to you when you take into account another novelty, the fact that I now have 4 heroes instead of 2. I have recruited Ranlu and Barak to assist Dallana and Lord Colligan. I have recruited them so they could retake, so they could reflag the mines I have previously lost, and they have done their job. So that's why I am in control of the mines, and why I have more heroes. So there you go. Oh, by the way, when I have mentioned corrupted footage, it's not that the corrupted footage got lost. This is the corrupted footage. What you are watching right now is the corrupted footage. There was only a tiny bit of corruption, and that was the spot where the new footage started overwriting the old footage, because apparently there is a size limit. So you cannot record 2 huge parts. I think it was about 2 hours or so that constitutes a hard limit, and beyond that point, it's probably not even about the length of time. It's about the size of the file. Once it exceeds a certain point, probably 4 gigabytes, although I would be fairly surprised if that was the case. Either way, if it exceeds a certain file size, it doesn't create a new file. It starts overwriting the file from the beginning. I hope you don't mind me talking over trading resources, which is most of the time not the most exciting of things to witness and to commentate on, might I add. As I have mentioned, and this is a brief, relatively speaking, this is a brief interlude in my overall commentary considering the length of this recording, so bear with me for a few minutes at most. The footage that has been recorded over, from a practical standpoint, is for me unrecoverable. It's just lost, and there's no way to retrieve it, for me. But bear in mind, the file got overwritten from the very beginning, and at the beginning of the file, you probably have some metadata. You know, not necessarily a sort of metadata you keep on each file in the file system, but you know, the sort of metadata some files like to keep track of. From a practical standpoint, this is not how an ordinary recording should be structured. This is not how this codec was supposed to work. This is not the way things were supposed to be. So reading that file proved to be exceedingly difficult. Recovering this footage, whatever of it was still available in that file, was not an easy task, and I've spent quite a bit of time on that, not wanting to re-record since that save point you have seen. As you can see from the length of the video, there will be quite a bit to do from that point onwards. So there we go. The downside is that even though I recovered the file, I did not recover the audio parts, so you are kind of forced to listen to the Necromancer theme on loop. Now you might argue, unfortunately this bastard ran away. Now you might argue that I could have since I have access to the soundtrack, I could have probably put the right tracks in the right places. Put the plains theme here when I'm looking at the grasslands, and when I enter the castle I could then fade it into the necromancer theme, or perhaps the knight theme when I enter the knight's castle. Just imagine how much effort that would require of me. So no thanks. But theoretically it could have been done. It could have been done. I could have also taken the sound files and arranged them so that you would be able to hear every goddamn sound effect that should have been there. I could have tried to sync them up manually with the video in front of me and played things like the arrows shooting right now, the spells getting cast, and so on and so forth. Once again, that's a possibility. Would have required enormous amounts of effort. I just didn't see it as a worthy investment. By the way, holy crap. There goes Weed Patch. I have less control of a castle, and for a good reason too. I have less control of it because of Armageddon. Now Dawn doesn't really have too big of an army, but I'm hesitant to attack someone who isn't afraid to use Armageddon. We're dealing with a rogue hero here, with access to an apocalyptic arsenal. This is not something I should take lightly. Anyway, as you can see, the enemies are just swarming my territory, and there seems to be no end in sight. I need to get to all of them, end their miserable lives so they won't pester me anymore. And then even more and more and more will come from the south and from the west. And I need to deal with those as well. Of course, uncovering more territory seems to be a decent idea. I will at least be able to see where they are coming from and all that. Unfortunately, if I was able to just venture there on my own, I would probably go there and conquer the castles outright. No, the problem is that I cannot afford such a trip, because of all the heroes coming from there and to begin with. This is the sort of problem that stops me from solving it by existing. I have transferred a few units using the regular conga line of heroes, and I'm about to attack Ruby. I need to be methodical in dealing with these pests. Of course, retaking the castle should be fairly simple, considering the fact that the wizard remaining there has not even decimated, just butchered almost all of her army in the process of casting Armageddon to win the fight. So I don't really have to deal with a lot there. And of course, battles in Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and most of the games in the series, if not all of them, are structured in a fairly peculiar way. The moment you lose all of your creatures, it doesn't matter who you are, what spells you have, it's just done, it's over. So even if you are a wizard with access to powerful spells like the Armageddon, once your final creature dies, it's over. You cannot win. In fact, you have lost at that point. So all I need to do is just strike at her and kill her final creature. Now, of course, there have been attempts to work around this. There have been attempts to fix this, and well, quite frankly, I think pretty much the only solid attempt to change this was in Heroes of Might and Magic 4. Well, they have changed the dynamic a little bit, and well, you could have multiple heroes with no armies, and they could actually accomplish things on their own. And of course, heroes being able to accomplish basic things without resorting to using spells has been a thing for all the installments afterwards, I guess. In the 5th one, the 6th one, and the 7th one, heroes can perform basic attacks, as you might call them, once a turn, but still. At pretty much any point you desire, they can do that, if you want them to. And of course, another idea popped into my mind before I had to mention to you the corruption. It has unfortunately taken its toll on my video footage. and an even greater toll on my audio, as you can absolutely hear. Now, I was about to mention the fact that it's pretty normal for you to get a single main hero and then you have all these secondary heroes, tertiary heroes. I've mentioned this countless times so far, and I keep doing so because it is the way to go over here. And that's because of the way the battles are structured. When you have a battle, you have one hero against another hero, and they have their armies. They fight and one of them gets out alive and the other one either doesn't or just runs away, which is probably the more common scenario. So you have these fights, and if you want to win such a fight, you don't just want to win, just barely win. No, you want to crush your opponent, you want to be more efficient, right? And if you have more creatures, you will kill his creatures faster. And by killing them faster, they will not be able to attack all that often. Not so many of them will be able to attack, so you'll be able to preserve more of your creatures. Which leads us to the conclusion that we should bring pretty much our entire army, as many creatures as we possibly can fit into a single hero, and we should have them all together just crush the enemies. So the enemies, of course, should also have the entire army, and they should crush you. And of course, as I've mentioned, sometimes it can result in a wash, sometimes it can be a fairly even trade, although not all that often. And sometimes there can be more of such fights, as you pick up the pieces and then try to build your army up once again. But what it discourages, what all of this discourages heavily, is splitting your army up. You don't really feel the desire to split your army up into, say, 2 heroes with decently sized armies, with big armies, but not huge armies, that would go places and accomplish separate goals on their own. You're absolutely discouraged by the game's mechanics from doing so, because you will just fail more often than not, because this is not the optimal way to play. If you encounter a single powerful hero on your way, you will just get slaughtered. Although I guess in certain scenarios this could work if you are able to avoid said hero, this primary hero for your enemy. If you are able to avoid him, just run away from him, and take some of his castles here and there, you could probably still play like that. Although eventually you would have to face this primary hero and you will have to fight him, so you will need a single hero to face him. And I guess it can be argued that maybe getting more castles this way, just being able to explore faster with more heroes, can give you an advantage. Perhaps if you have, let's say, 2 heroes with decently sized armies, you're able to get castles faster and therefore flag mines faster, obviously with your tertiary heroes, as you might call them, or maybe in this case secondary. If you can flag the mines faster, get more castles, avoiding the primary hero of your enemy, maybe you can get an advantage and eventually have a big enough army to actually defeat him, with his only saving grace being this single powerful hero, and with you being the one to play hide and seek constantly against him, and successfully. Of course, this allows you and this requires you to have amazing mobility. If you do not have mobility, if you cannot run around him, if the map is so structured that you cannot just run in circles around him, outrun him, you will not be able to succeed. You will fail miserably, they will catch up to you, or they will block you from escaping, and your heroes will die. And in such a case, if you had 2 moderately powerful heroes, and you suddenly have a single moderately powerful hero against 1 ridiculously powerful hero for your opponent, you're not in a good spot. And will you be able to get a second moderately powerful hero? I don't think so. Maybe if your second moderately powerful hero escaped and you recruited him back at the tavern and you have the army to replenish his forces with the castles you have acquired previously, maybe in such circumstances you are still able to somehow manage. Maybe you are still able to achieve victory that way, although it's sounds like a very messy way to play. Managing all the heroes, just keeping track of everyone, sending them into the correct spots on the map is so tedious. Let's not run away from this term. It is tedious, it's tiring. Most of the time, these are not exciting things you are doing. You're sending your primary hero to do things, which mostly consist of either conquering poorly defended castles or fighting poorly equipped and poorly just poorly equipped heroes with small pathetic armies that you can immediately crush. But you still have to send your main hero because these armies are probably more powerful than the armies of your secondary or tertiary heroes. Now I'm considering whether to go forth or go back. See, this is the annoying part, because my enemy does have quite a few heroes, and they will annoy me. And I have 3 additional heroes, and I want to protect them. I don't just want them to die. I don't want my additional heroes to die. I don't want to lose my castles. I don't want to have to send my main hero over here to have to reflag everything with my secondary heroes again. But if I do so, if I come back as I absolutely have came back, as I do so, I am once again forced into this defensive position. I once again am not uncovering new territory, I am not conquering new castles, I am just going over here, wiping out enemy heroes, and they can get more heroes, they have the resources, they have the rest of the map. They can afford this. How long can I afford this? Oh, and just for the shoulders of this, coming back to what I've been mentioning previously about 2 moderately powerful heroes as an alternative playstyle, you once again have to deal with the problem of the enemy hero just getting all the experience, or at the very least a lot of experience due to all the fights. Maybe if both of your heroes can engage in an equal amount of fights, you can have them at the same experience level, and as such, once you combine the armies to defeat the main hero, maybe you're able to do that. But a more elegant solution, an alternative solution to that problem is something you've seen in Heroes of Might and Magic 4, which just changes the formula of the game quite substantially. Once again, we have a guy run away, but I get a single skeleton. Changing the formula substantially is pretty much the only way to avoid this. And Heroes of Might and Magic 4 changed this by allowing you to fight with multiple heroes. You don't just have to have a single hero in your battle against a single hero in a battle. You can have more heroes, and you can have them fight. If you could have a title in the Heroes of Might and Magic series where you had 2 heroes leading a single army, let's say, that might be an interesting twist on the entire thing. Because then you could have 2 moderately powerful heroes against a single very powerful hero, and they would have a chance to an extent. Because if the moderately powerful heroes are low when it comes to the levels, if they are not as powerful, they are not giving as big of a stat boost to the army, do not have access to as powerful spells, and so on and so forth. Now, it depends on the installment, really, because you can have different skill sets, different things that affect your army, different things that affect your combat prowess with a given hero. But once again, this is the sort of alternative playstyle that most of the time is not really supported by the game itself. Now, as you can see, I'm sending Ranlu over here to the west to uncover a bit of the map, because I'm tired of constantly defending from the forces I cannot even see approaching my territory, or what I could refer to as my territory. I just want to see a bit further, and I'm willing to risk Ranlu's life. Was the Ranlu or was the Barak? I don't remember now. Either way, I'm willing to risk one of my additional heroes just to be able to see a tiny bit further for now. I cannot send Lord Koldragon, my primary hero, to accomplish this, because he has to defend right now. Because close to my castle of Sorbigal, here is this douchebag, this knight, who thinks he can try and assault my castle. Thinks he can just murder my additional heroes. Thinks I'll let him. I absolutely will not. I will crush him. Of course, as you can clearly see, I am currently defending And defending is important to not lose, however, to win, you need to attack. So if you keep defending and defending, you will eventually fail to defend and you will lose. However, if you try to attack, you might just lose immediately if you fail to attack properly and to get your value out of the attack. Damn, this game is so snowbally. It's so outright flawed, and yet it evidently is fun to an extent. A lot of fun elements to it. Don't mind that. That was nothing. It absolutely can be fun to an extent. Certain elements of it can be enjoyable. And of course this is the second installment, so some things over here have been improved upon. Some of them have only been changed very recently, so some of the elements have stuck with the series for a very, very long time. For instance, one of the elements that continues to bother me is the reinforcement mechanic. You just have to have these conga lines because these are the most efficient ways to get reinforcements from your castle to your main hero. You want to get reinforcements because you don't want your hero running around, your main hero running around with a weak army. You want to make that army stronger and stronger, and sometimes getting reinforcements from conquered castles isn't really that much of an option, isn't really that good of a deal. So, on the contrary, you have to get them from a different castle, for instance from your starting castle, from the same sort of castle, if you have more than one of them, because you want to have as many units as you possibly can from some castle. And at times, in certain installments, you want to have units from a given castle in your hero's army based on the type of hero you are currently fielding as your main hero. Either way, you need to get the forces from the castle to the hero. How on earth can you do that? Well, this has been touched upon, this has been innovated upon later on in the series, so it's one of the elements that has been taken into account, and it is an obvious annoyance. But then again, some people might consider it a core part of the Heroes of Might and Magic experience, even though it can be annoying to an extent. They can consider it this sort of basic thing you do in this game over and over. And if it is a thing you most commonly associate with the game, due to playing it, and due to doing this sort of thing over and over in each of your playthroughs, is it not a core element of the game? How can something you keep doing within a given title and keep spending most of your time on not be a core element? How can it not be core to the experience? Well, it obviously can, but still, this argument seems sound, right? It seems to make sense. Speaking of arguments that make sense and of different approaches, I have... I hope I'm not making this up, I hope it's not a false memory on my part, but I think I've heard in an interview one thing that has shocked me to an extent. It surprised me because it wasn't something I was expecting, wasn't something I was aware of, and it was one of those rare moments in my life when I have actually learned something new, heard something interesting from another person, as weird as it may sound. I've heard in this interview that when they've asked people about the core experience of playing a Heroes of Might and Magic game, because they wanted to establish what the hell a Heroes of Might and Magic game is, what elements they absolutely need to preserve to make a Heroes of Might and Magic game, which is reasonable, isn't it? They wanted to make a new installment, so they wanted to find out what on earth should be in that installment. What are the elements we absolutely cannot leave out? What are these core basic things about this series that appeal to people? They've asked different people their opinion on this. They've asked them the question, and apparently different people gave completely different answers. It wasn't a case of them just naming some of the elements and then other people naming a few more elements, but still sticking to the same core sort of ideas and answers. No. Apparently, different people perceived different things as core to the experience. And I don't remember the details, but I guess some of them said, oh, well, the call of Heroes of Might and Magic are these tactical battles and a hex grid, or perhaps, you know, and a squared grid if you desperately want to have a squared grid, because that's what makes the difference in the game. And some people said, well, you run around on an adventure map and you keep leveling up your heroes. I think that's very, very key and important to the Heroes of Might and Magic experience. Of course, some people might have named multiple resources, a veritable deluge of resources that you know the Heroes of Might and Magic series fall. The fact that you have heroes that lead on, there are so many elements of the series one might name as call. But overall, I just keep asking myself lately, do we really need a 7th installment of the series? Do we need more Heroes of Might and Magic games? And if so, what sort of games should these games be like? Should they innovate? And if they should innovate, how should they innovate? What should these games be like? What should be contained within them? Which mechanics should they preserve? Which mechanics should they change? To both be Heroes of Might and Magic games, to be games you would consider a part of the series, and to also be entertaining, you know, to be something new, to be fun to play. By the way, I have recruited Sarakin, the 9th level hero I have previously killed at some point. So I have yanked him from my enemy's side, and now I'm able to command him on the battlefield. And this particular castle defense may seem insignificant to you. It may seem like nothing. It may seem as if I am about to lose, but check this out. Now this is where things get crazy. And I am extremely glad that I was able to preserve this footage, because otherwise you would not have seen this. I cast Resurrect True on my champions, which have previously fallen. And as Resurrect True does, it resurrected the champions. And so far this does not seem weird, this does not seem overly weird. I attack the Titans with the champions, and the Titans kill the champions. Unfortunately, surprisingly, the champions were only able to attack the Titans, they were not able to run around for some reason. And now that I have resurrected the champions for a second time, they cannot do anything, they are stuck. Which greatly confuses me. I try to click around, but there's nothing I can do. I cannot move them anywhere, I cannot even attack the Titans. All I can do is skip the turn, thankfully. I don't really have much of an army at this point, so I'm not really pleased with the result. I figured, hey, if I kill the Titans, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to move my champions once more. Which isn't necessarily what I should be doing in this spot. But back then I had no idea what the optimal play was, because I was as confused as you might be right now. Basically, I can pretty much ignore the Titans because they are next to a unit, so they cannot shoot. However, they cannot attack the champions. So they are basically frozen. I can, however, target the Titans. So a good idea would be to blind the mages, to kill the orcs, to kill the mages, and then, as the final step in all of this, to eventually kill the Titans. It may be fairly weird and confusing, but I guess I understand how it came to be. And I have a bit of a deja vu over here. Haven't I experienced this before? Or is it just that this footage is so old and I have seen this so many times that it just seems to be a thing I have seen before? Well, either way, even if I have already explained that, the situation is, as far as I understand it, fairly simple. The champions occupy 2 hexes on the battlefield. And of course, when you cast the Resurrect spell or the Resurrect True spell, you raise a unit from the dead. And if you raise a unit that is 2 hexes, it will have to spawn on one of the hexes. And as far as I can tell, the hex the unit technically is on is the back hex. And the hex in front of that creature is a hex it also happens to occupy as a 2-hex creature. But nominally, it's on the back hex. And I'm not sure whether this occurs every time you cast Resurrect True on a 2-tile creature that's at the very edge of the map, or whether it only occurs if you cast Resurrect True on a 2-tile creature, on a 2-hex creature that is at the edge of the map, and you cast it on the tile that is exactly the edge tile of the map. As in the tile that is next to nothing on the left or the right. Because in these circumstances, as far as I understand it, you resurrect the creature, and it gets resurrected nominally on that tile you have clicked, which in most circumstances makes perfect sense, right? You have a creature on that tile, you resurrect it, it gets resurrected on that tile, except that that tile and getting resurrected in the context of the champions means that the back hex becomes the hex that used to be the front of the unit. With the back of the unit suddenly occupying, well, the front of the unit used to be, and the front of the unit occupying nothingness. Which means that the unit gets stuck. Fortunately, I was able to get out of that. There was no escaping, I could not run away, because it was a castle siege and I was the defender. There's no running away in these circumstances. So you cannot even do that. You can't just run away from your opponent if you are stuck like that. I had to negotiate, I had to surrender. Unfortunately, I was able to surrender due to how ridiculously long the fight has been going on for. Quite a peculiar experience, don't you think? Once again, this was one of the things that convinced me. Oh crap, Gwyneth is here. I guess I need to skedaddle. I do not want my heroes to die needlessly. Let's uncover a bit more territory, shall we? If she goes this way, I'll have a shorter route to take her out. Eventually. Of course, with the Traveler's Boots of Mobility, my main hero, Lord Collegon, can travel quite a way in any direction he chooses. Which is one of the things that really helps you in this game. I think the Traveler's Boots of Mobility are my favorite artifact. Of course, they do not give you tangible benefits in fights, but on the adventure map, there are very few things I would prefer more. Because mobility is pretty much everything. Yeah, you can slowly accomplish many things and sluggishly move between locations. There's a reason people like logistics, isn't there? And I'm about to lose one of my heroes, which is sad, but I kind of brought it upon myself. And this is not a case of victim blaming here, okay? It's like, it's not that he deserved to die because he was too sluggish, he did not go to the east, he went too far. It's just that a mistake was made and the inevitable happened. Such is, I guess, the way of things. He has served me well, but now is forced to facepalm as his units keep dying. See, this is what I've mentioned when discussing fair fights in this game. And I guess, of course, that this is not the main hero of my opponent, although it might as well be, considering the fact that it is a fairly pitiful army in comparison to mine, I would say. But mostly because of the number of skeletons I have. But then again, it's absolutely possible that might be the main hero of my opponent. At this stage in the game, after we had a serious clash beforehand, I don't know whether it was between me and orange or between me and green. Maybe between me and yellow, but that would be somewhat surprising. And of course, who remembers yellow anymore? Yellow has been eliminated weeks ago. Here comes Celia, here's a castle I need to reconquer, and here's a hero I need to kill to prevent further deaths. And here's Gwyneth coming towards my territory. I think the safest bet would be to get the castle first anyway, even though it's a little bit out of the way. Because I don't want my enemy to recruit additional heroes from there and to get reinforcements from there. And I also will appreciate the additional income. So what I need to do is kill this single titan. My losses are non-zero. Which is unfortunate, but what you gonna do? I lost a single power lich. That's the way it has to be, apparently. I'll have to mount a defense there eventually. Or should I say, fairly soon, considering the fact that Celia is on her way to get that castle. But I also need to defeat this guy over here, this wizard. Who doesn't really have too imposing of an army, does he? He absolutely does not. And yet I still need to bother my main hero to go all the way over here and to finish him off. And I'll need to head south to kill Gwyneth, who very well may be the most powerful orange hero on the map. I do of course need to send Lord Colgan to defend against Gwyneth, but Celia, with only several skeletons and a few titans, this is the sort of threat I should be able to fend off with a secondary hero, I guess. This is a sort of situation when the difference between secondary and tertiary heroes should come into focus very clearly. I should have tertiary heroes flag all the mines, carry all the stuff, just pass the reinforcements around, do things like that. And secondary heroes with some smaller armies from other conquered castles, not my main one, not from Solvigal, but for instance in these circumstances from that knight's castle. I could have them running around and defending the territory I have already conquered. This is common practice in the sense that I have been doing it previously, so this is something I should start doing. Of course it requires even more busy work. It requires me to keep track of Lord Colgan and what he is doing, how he is conquering new things, and then I will need to keep track of my secondary heroes and how they are defending the territory, so I'd have to keep track of all the enemy heroes and which enemy heroes I will be taking out with my secondary heroes instead of my main hero. Now I have to approximate whether a given enemy can be taken out by secondary heroes, or if I need to move my primary hero all the way back. I would need to recruit as many units as I would need for my secondary heroes, but also keep track of the army I'll be sending as reinforcements to my primary hero. But then again, this is what the game is all about, isn't it? You have to manage your resources properly. And of course, in the most general sense, this is pretty much something you need to account for in every game in existence. You still have to manage something, make some sort of decision, and well, maybe not in all games. I guess there are some where you just sit back and enjoy the show. Although, to be called games, you still have to notify the game that you want to proceed, so you have to walk someplace to engage with some new content. But there isn't really any choice involved, not much strategy involved. And don't get me wrong, these games absolutely have their place. Because some people condescendingly and with derision refer to them as walking simulators. Some people don't necessarily like things like visual novels. And then there of course are adventure games, which some I guess might define by the fact that they have puzzles in them. Whether that is a proper definition, a proper part of the definition, could be absolutely challenged. And of course, getting into this discussion could probably fill the rest of the video, but I will not get into that. I will, however, say that leaving everything in the hands of the player, just giving him all the freedom, is not the greatest of ideas. And this, of course, sounds horribly counterintuitive, and I do like that. I do like making statements that seem counterintuitive at first, and then I like explaining why they aren't necessarily such. Why they can make sense if you understand them properly. For instance, when it comes to Heroes of Might and Magic, I have already explained quite thoroughly, I guess, why there are some lulls in the action. There's the initial wind-up period, and there's the inevitable wind-down period at the end. And let's say a single fight in the middle that's exciting and that decides all of it. it's extremely snowbally past that point. And because it is snowbally, you cannot lose stuff early on when it is extremely valuable, so you need to be very, very patient, you need to be extremely careful. And then of course at the very end you cannot really lose stuff because you already have the advantage. And if you do not have the advantage, then you can slowly start bleeding out, if you so desire. You can slowly watch the game just slip away from your fingers. And there will be very little you'll be able to do. Because at that point you will not be sweeping up, the enemy will be sweeping up, and you will just be slowly losing everything until you are all gone and the game is over. So I guess there is a thing to be said about scripted events. If you can predict to an extent how things will go, if you can actually set things up so that they will be exciting for the player to experience, then I guess that is better than just leaving it all up to the player and just having these sort of scenarios play out over and over as he plays in the optimal way and wins, or doesn't really play in the optimal way and loses horribly. I guess it's not that you have to play in a particular way, and if you don't you will absolutely lose. It's just that a good way to play and the things you need to an extent to do in order to win eventually just aren't necessarily all that exciting, aren't necessarily all that appealing. And if the moves you need to make to win aren't the moves you want to make, then that creates a dichotomy that is fairly sad and disappointing, isn't it? Look at this situation, for instance. I've made an interesting choice. Instead of pursuing Gwyneth, I decided to go west. I decided to go west, and then I decided to go northwest instead of going southwest. I intend on conquering the castle to the northwest, and then I intend on returning, either immediately or after a brief while, and perhaps conquering the castle to the southwest as well. Either way, I'll try to defend against Gwyneth with what I have over here. I will get rid of her if she conquers any of my castles, I'll take it back. I just figured staying back and defending my territory was getting me absolutely nowhere. So I need to take the initiative, go to the enemy's territory and conquer his castles. Which doesn't seem all that challenging, does it? Look at this army. Well, this is pathetic. 3 orcs, 9 balls, 12 rocks, seriously? This can be killed so quickly, especially seeing how many skeletons I have. I could kill this with the skeletons alone, absolutely. Not even any spells to hamper me, no losses, nothing. Of course, there's also Celia defending the castle, so I'll need to take care of her as well. This was only a secondary hero I've been fighting, so hold on, I guess it wasn't as horrible as I have just described. I take it back. Now this is the meat of the thing, this is the main fight over here. This is what I am dealing with. And I guess that the yellow player has been eliminated because he held the knight's castle, so as I took it away from him, he was simply unable to go on. Because the 2 remaining castles, I assume, because I don't necessarily remember how this map is structured in its entirety, I assume that they each had a single castle, and that therefore taking away a single castle just eliminated a single opponent outright. Which would mean that eliminating this castle will only leave the green heroes running around and trying to get a castle for themselves, but other than that, if they do not manage to get one in time, in 7 days, they will just be gone, they will be dead, and the green player will be eliminated. I probably should have done this sooner, I probably could have won a lot sooner, maybe I was overly cautious. Look at this fight, however, my skeletons got absolutely nowhere. They were in the back, they did not deal any sort of damage. They kept approaching the enemy's army, they wanted to get inside but they didn't. So in that fight I might as well have not had them. What did I accomplish with them? What did I accomplish with them indeed? They were fairly useless. And by saying that, I don't mean that I shouldn't have had the skeletons to begin with. Let me remind you that in that horrible fight back then, in the deciding fight in this game, I would argue, I lost pretty much everything except for the skeletons, and the skeletons kept me alive. They were the reason I was still able to return after murdering pretty much the entire army of my enemy, and they were the reason I ended up on top in the end. So of course the skeletons are valuable here, but what I wanted to point out was the fact that even though the main of my army for quite a while have been the skeletons, and the rest of the army has just been recent recruitments, I did not even need the skeletons. I did not need this amazing powerful force I have gathered since the beginning of the game to win the encounter. I was able to conquer the castle with the few bone dragons I got later on, as I got the bone dragons, finally, eventually. And not even the mummies, because the mummies did not get the either. Just a few vampire lords and the few bone dragons that were able to deal the damage, and a few spells I was able to cast. That was it. That was all that was necessary for me to actually conquer the castle, to defeat the more powerful hero, Celia, defending the green player's castle. At this point I am asking myself a very important question. Should I actually go east, defend my territory, now that I have about 3/4 of the map under my control, or should I push onwards, go south and conquer the last remaining castle on the map, as far as I can see? I'm trying to explore in all directions with my remaining heroes, while Lord Colorgon will be sent to the south. The enemy hero will get quite desperate when deprived of the castles, but I do need to do this. I do not want to just go and defend and then promptly lose my recent acquisition up north. I certainly don't want that to happen, and even though I don't want to lose my previous acquisition, the Knight's Castle, or, of course, I do not wish to lose Solpical, my starting Necromancer's Castle, I still want to have control of as big of a part of the map as I possibly can at the same time. If I conquer the final castle, the enemy will no longer be able to recruit new heroes, at least for a time, until a new castle is acquired by him, which will require a fight, which will require a siege on his part. He will have to engage my forces and conquer one of my castles. This will, of course, deplete his army of at least some creatures, so force him to lose a part of what he has currently, to spend resources in hopes of gaining more resources. And as I control more and more of the map, as I control the mines and the castles, I have the income to recruit more units than he can. I am therefore able to win economically. You should be able to see at this point why I feel safe and secure in my position. I have 3 of the castles. I believe there are 4 castles on this map. So as I gain control of the final one, I will have all of them. And surprisingly, but fortunately, there are no castles up here to the north. It seemed that way, that road seemed to lead to some important place, but it only leads to the coast. These orange heroes are a nuisance, and I will need to get rid of them very, very soon, especially of Gwyneth. They are a threat, especially to the Knight's Castle I have previously conquered, Weedpatch. But I do want to fight Rialdo, and I do want to conquer this Knight's Castle. If I can accomplish this, I can just chase down the enemy heroes. Holy Shadow, of course, deals damage to most of my creatures except for the rangers, and is a fairly good spell to use against an undead army. Coincidentally, I now have 1,337 skeletons, so that's pretty elite. Of course, Holy Shout has the additional benefit of not harming your own units if you do not have any undead units, so it's a decent spell to use against a purely undead army or a mostly undead army. if no such units are in yours. As you can clearly see, it's of fairly limited utility, because the army you're facing specifically has to be comprised of the undead, which is one of the 6 factions in this game. Not necessarily the most common of scenarios, but hey, if you know that you will be facing them, you might as well take this sort of spell with you. Although it does not deal absurd amounts of damage. But of course it deals damage across the entire battlefield, which is something extremely nice. Other spells are a lot more limited in their targeting. Although of course there are some which can deal area of effect damage, such as Cold Ring or Meteor Shower. And then of course these spells that deal damage to the entire area of the battlefield, except that they deal it to all or almost all units, with the exception of those who are of course immune to magic. Now don't worry, I will not ignore what you have just seen. I will certainly remark on it. As you have probably noticed, I've replaced my mummies with the Crusaders. I might have as well, right? It was a fairly small group of mummies, and the mummies, even though upgraded, even though they are royal mummies, they are fairly slow nonetheless. Replacing the mummies with Crusaders seemed like a no-brainer. Crusaders are tier 6 units, so the unit of the highest tier. Of course, the Knight's Castle is considered the weakest when it comes to raw power of the units, but then again, getting the Crusaders is a fairly cheap investment. They do not cost any additional resources, they merely cost gold. And even though they may not be the most powerful in comparison one by one to other tier 6 units, from other castles, or perhaps when compared to neutral tier 6 units, if you have a decent number of them, they can still be quite powerful. And of course there's the unfortunate fact that while I could have learned Dimension Door from this newly acquired castle, I did not, because my wisdom is not yet an expert and Dimension Door is a level 5 spell. And Lord Colligan at this point can only learn level 4 spells at most. So that's something I will not be able to make use of, that's something I will just have to live with as this game slowly winds down and I'm slowly getting closer and closer to victory. I will not have the luxury of chasing down enemy heroes using Dimension Door, which would be quite nice. It would be a quite efficient and elegant solution to my problem, but it's one that I cannot utilize. And getting Wisdom on Expert is unlikely to happen, considering that I would need even more experience, and I'm unlikely to get more experience in this game because there will not really be any major encounters. And once I get through any major encounters that I may still have in this match, in this scenario, the game will be over. It will be over because these final encounters will be against the final heroes on the map. Thus, eliminating them eliminates the need for me to actually chase anyone down, because they will be dead by that point, and I may learn Wisdom on Expert, or I actually may not learn Wisdom on Expert by that point. I may get enough experience or not. It won't matter. Speaking of things that don't matter, my enemies. Some of them are prancing around the map, and some of them are teleporting around from place to place using Dimension Door. In particular, one of them is teleporting around using Dimension Door as far as I have noticed, and the other ones are just prancing around. And there are, of course, fewer and fewer of them as time goes on. Since it is up to me, the number of enemies on the map tends towards 0. Gwyneth has positioned herself to the north of my main castle of Solpigol. Preparations are being made for the castle's defense. Darlana, my second-in-command, is in charge of said defense. 6 bone dragons await her command. Quite an assortment of spells as well. Can she make it? Can she actually hold Gwyneth back? Can she defend my castle of Solpigol? Gwyneth's army is not impressive, it seems fairly weak. But Lana's level isn't all too impressive either. So while she commands a superior force in numbers and quality alike, this might be a tough match, especially considering the fact that I have seen that Gwyneth is capable of using 5th level spells. So she might be able to wipe out my forces with magic. Preparations are underway in all the castles I have control over. There will be no mistakes. I will not slip up. I will not leave anything for my enemies to exploit. I will not leave them the slightest of chances. As the noose slowly tightens around the neck of the betrayers, I am slowly preparing their doom and waiting for them to make their moves. And now I can finally strike. Gwyneth chose to flee. She did not feel strong enough to strike at the heart of my territory, to attack the castle of Solpigol. And now she must face judgment. She will be tried for her betrayal against our king, Lord Archibald, and against the people of this land. Some of them she has led to their deaths. Others, the lives of them she has endangered by attacking them, by striking against them in combat. And yet others she has endangered by participating in this rebellion at all, by leading this peasant revolt. The instability in this sector shall soon be a thing of the past. As far as I can currently tell, a single foe remains. A single knight called Maximus is still holding out against my forces. Is still out there, unwilling to give up, unwilling to see reason, to see that he has already lost, that there is nothing he can do. One of the interesting things about the undead is that you don't have to make rousing speeches at all. The skeletons don't care. The zombies don't care. The bone dragons don't really care. As soon as this is dealt with, soon, very soon, Maximus will no longer care either. As much as he may care now, as much as he may believe in the righteousness of his cause, it shall all soon end. Should I be flashy here? To an extent? Should I do anything impressive? An elemental storm, perhaps? Wasn't as effective as I had suspected. Probably caused more harm to me than did good to anyone. Oh well. The enemy has fled. As such, as far as I know, I have eliminated all the opponents on the map. And yet the scenario is not yet over, and there is still territory to uncover, which means that I might have to build a boat and sail someplace. Assail yet one more castle, perhaps? Somewhere out there. I, for one, am not particularly fond of naval assaults. All the time wasted embarking and disembarking. All the time you have to spend aimlessly sailing around looking for an island. All the things that could happen out there. You may lose some troops to a random event. If you venture into the wrong whirlpool, it can transport you somewhere random. Many things can occur. For me, it's usually not a pleasant experience, although I guess it is supposed to be somewhat different. I guess it may have its merits, perhaps. I believe some may like it. I simply do not. Since I can, I should almost certainly reinforce Colligan's army before he ventures out there. Who knows what horrors lurk there? Who knows what horrible forces await him there? And 12 power liches seem like a reasonable replacement for all the rangers he used to carry for pretty much the entirety of this scenario. Now let us sail towards our destiny, let us see what there is still to see. But while all that sailing is going on, I should not just wait around on the mainland. I should not just abandon all the duties of my secondary heroes. I should not just decide to wait for Lord Colligan's return. I should definitely all that is in my power over here to secure as many resources as I can, to flag all the mines I have not yet flagged, to do all the things that need doing. The things you do once, the things you do once a week. All of them need to be done. And I do have the heroes to do it. I do have the forces to recruit in the castles I control. There is plenty of stuff to be done. And it shall be done. Even in Hilltop, my latest acquisition, with the most impressive and powerful mage guild in the entire region. Even though I shall still recruit forces. Even though it is the furthest away from any real danger that could approach it from the sea. Even though it is so far away, it is so remote and so safe. I will still try to defend it, because who knows? I will still get forces there, because why not? If the week of plague hits, why should my troops die? Why should they go to waste? If I can just get them, if I can acquire them, if I can potentially make use of them. Well, is the island. What the hell? I have uncovered pretty much everything. I can see almost the entirety of the map right now. Where's the island? What am I missing? What on earth could possibly this missing castle be? Is there a missing castle? I don't think so. I think I've uncovered all there was to uncover. There's no more land that could have possibly missed. And as such, you can now see that it was a fool's errand. I did not need to sail anywhere, because there was no need for sailing. There was no additional castle for me to actually get. All I need to do is conquer these villages, these little towns. That's all I need to do. That's the only reason why the mines are still flagged for the enemy. They do not control any castles, but they control some towns, which means they cannot recruit additional heroes, but they have not lost quite yet. But they will soon. Soon. As soon as I'm done with these forces, as soon as I conquer these towns, it will be over. Only one remains, as far as I can tell from the mini. Oh, sorry, only two remain. Because of course the ones belonging to the green player tend to blend in with the rest of the green color that I tend to associate with the grasslands. But of course there is a green town down there. As you can see on the minimap, it's that dark green rectangle between the red and the orange. Two towns yet remain. As soon as I get both of them, I will be able to say to myself that I have successfully quelled the rebellion. But before I do that, I feel the need to actually flag all the things. Because why not? If I want to gain control of the entire territory, and since I have already sailed so far, since I've done so much, why not? Let me acquire it. Let me make the entirety of the map red. Let me regain control of everything. Every castle, every town, every mine, everything. It shall all be under my control very, very soon. Of course, conquering towns isn't as exciting as conquering castles. They usually don't have the defenses, and without the defenses, the fight isn't as exciting as it could be. The orange player has been defeated. It has been done. Now all that stands before me is a single town that belongs to the Green Baron. As soon as I conquer it, it'll be all done. As you can see, some of the mines or resource providing nodes, such as the sawmills, which can hardly be considered mines now, can they? Some of them became white, as they now have no owners, because the Orange Baron has been eliminated very recently. The green one does not control any mines whatsoever. So all that remains for me to do is to flag the 3 remaining ones, and I will have everything. I theoretically could set sail and uncover the small shreds of territory I have not yet uncovered. I could theoretically get the few artifacts I did not yet get. I could theoretically just conquer this town today and not wait for this sawmill to get flagged and for this crystal mine to get flagged as well. But why not wait? It's a single day's difference. Now everything is under my control. Amidst all of this, a thought came into my mind. If I get to use Lord Colocan in later missions, if I get to keep him as he is, perhaps I get to keep his stats. I will almost certainly not get to keep his army, and probably not his artifacts either, but maybe the stats? Maybe the skills? Maybe the experience level? Who knows? The attack and defense and knowledge and spell power values, maybe? It seems unlikely. It doesn't seem to be supported by the save system. Doesn't seem like the sort of thing that would happen in this game. But it may be the case. It may. What if it is? What if I could keep the experience level? What if I could keep the artifacts? I would certainly feel like a fool if I didn't make the best use of the situation, wouldn't I? At the very least, I can acquire the 2 artifacts over there to the northwest. But to acquire them, I need space in my inventory. Of course, one space is taken by the spellbook. But the others are filled with artifacts of little value in some cases. Some of them are clearly inferior to others. And I only need 2 spots for now, so I will only free 2 spots. I have no idea what troops he might have later on. I have no idea whether I will get to keep the artifacts at all. But I might as well do this. It's only a few minutes at most. At this point, it's not that big of a difference, is it? And besides, I get to kill more peasants, so that's always a bonus, isn't it? It's amazing that after everything has already fallen, after all the forces have been eradicated, all the heroes yielded to me, these peasants still oppose me. They are still there. Relentless, unyielding. Why? Why would they? Why won't they just give up? Why won't they just disperse, disappear? Go back to the fields. Are they really this desperate? Are they really this upset? Is anyone really doing them this much harm? We are in control now, you pathetic creatures. We are the rulers. Just bow down to us and no harm shall come to you. Why would you not relent? Why would you not give up? Why would you not yield to such overwhelming forces? Why are they being irrational? I guess they got what they deserved. The punishment for treason is death. Of course, the nomad's boots of mobility increase my movement on land. And as a bonus, I get this magnificent sword, which increases my attack skill by 3. As you may have noticed, I already had a second dragon sword, so now I can dual wield dragon swords, which is all kinds of awesome. The time has come to finish this, to extinguish the final glowing embers of the rebellion, to erase all hope for its victory. It's mostly symbolic. These forces do not pose the smallest of threats to me, but I shall still make an example of them. Slay them mercilessly in the name of our Lord Archibald. Let them pay for their betrayal. There we go. With Wisdom and Expert, I now can cast Dimension Door.
Your punishment of the peasants was inspiring. An exemplary job. Our next move is to conquer the rural lords near Roland's castle. While these lords can be defeated using conventional methods, it is the firm opinion of my chief warlock advisor that the aid of the Dragon King would be an effective weapon against our enemies. Unfortunately, the Dragon King will not help us voluntarily. What is your counsel, my general? Shall we launch an immediate attack against Roland's vassals, or shall we first conquer the dragons?